Welcome, Notre Dame fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, that guy right there.
I get that it's always the reverse of where you want to go. It's like, okay, wait a minute. No, he's to my right. No. Okay. Yeah.
And I thought I had it worked out too. Anyway, Brian Driscoll is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. The dynamic duo is back at it again. If you were with us yesterday, we broke down the offense. We talked about kind of our strengths, or what we feel are the strengths, the concerns, what the offense needs to do to, bring this team where we think it can be. And today we are going to do the very same thing with the defense. And I will preface this entire conversation with we do have an open practice today, but it's only a half an hour version. So we're not going to do a specific podcast to cover the open part of practice, but we will talk about it tomorrow. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was to say, look, the next two practices. Do you have practice availability tomorrow too, Vince?
Today and tomorrow are the final two availabilities.
It's 2 30-minute deals,
right?
Which means we're going to see stretch, individual, and maybe some team takeoff. Right? We're not going to learn anything about this football team the next 2 days.
No,
we're going to put content out. Other sites are going to put content out because we're going to tell you what we see from it, and that's our job, right? But I'm just letting you all know we're not going to learn anything new about this football team unless we see somebody injured today or tomorrow, right? So, yes. I mean, what this football team is going to be, we've seen as much as we're going to know to learn that between now and September 5th.
Correct. Yeah.
So just preparing you for it. There's going to be some cool highlights to get out of it. Chris we have someone that's going to be there, videoing today and tomorrow, and Vince is going to be there. Mike's going to be there. So, I mean, we're going to be there and we're going to cover it. I'm just letting y'all know, like, there's going to be stuff to report on, but it's not going to be like, oh, wow, we learned this thing. And
nothing earth shattering.
So-and-so is going to be a great player now because we saw him do team takeoff,
Right.
But part of that is because, look, Notre Dame's now in Florida State prep.
Yes.
Right? That's where we're at in fall camp now. It's Florida State prep. It's situational prep. It's okay. Now we've kind of established the foundation. Now let's dive into it. And at the end of the day, we're going to learn a lot about this Notre Dame defense as we kind of dive into the season, because honestly, in a lot of ways, Vince, I kind of feel like the defense is a little bit more of an unknown than the offense in some ways, and although there's more confidence that the defense is going to be good because of our confidence in Marcus Freeman, the talent returning, and the fact that they've been so good the last 3-4 years. But in a lot of ways, there's still a lot we don't know as far as the detail. I know what Tommy Rees likes to do run game wise. I don't know which is going to get the greater emphasis, but I don't think we're going to see a bunch of new concepts we've never seen before.
Right, exactly.
The defense is like, I don't really know what Marcus Freeman's going to do with this group of players. We've talked to sources and we've talked to him and all those kind of things, but we're not going to really know until we get to Florida State. And so even though there's a great deal of confidence inside of the ball, there's still a lot to learn. And that's the reason I wish I could just kind of remember the movie Click with Adam Sandler?
With Adam Sandler.
Like, I wish I had a thing where I could just kind of fast forward the next 2 weeks and just kind of get to, the Friday, that Sunday where they play Florida State, but
the manner in which practice goes for the defense as well leaves a lot to the imagination.
You guys don't see much anything beyond
defensively. Yeah, they do. They work a lot of individual stuff, which is good. I mean, they're working fundamentals. They're working a lot of that stuff. And granted, it was fall camp, so that's what you're supposed to do, right? And so maybe we'll see a little bit more team defense. Doubtful, not holding my breath, obviously. But, we're not going to see depth chart movement, as much that, in the next 2 days. We're just not going to, because that's not what this next week and a half is all about for this team. It's not about depth chart movement. It's not about that kind of stuff. It's about, what's Florida State going to throw at us?
There will be some of that to a degree.
Right.
But it's not like a kid who's buried on the third team is all of a sudden going to start in 2 weeks.
Exactly.
But that's what makes it fun. And that's what makes this kind of the year. This is that time where, as coaches, you start to really get fired up because you're like, okay, we're now focusing on an opponent.
Yes.
We've got now something to really, really kind of burrow in on, and that's the fun part. And so we're going to start learning a lot about this defense. But before we do that, we have a lot we want to talk about between now and then about this defense, and that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to kind of take our final deep dive into this defense. talk about what are the things that we think we're going to see, what are the questions that still remain, because there's always questions about a football team until you actually see them together. Even if you return all 22 starters and all, and all your coaches and all that, you still don't know what the offseason will do for your football team, good or bad.
Right.
And so those are the things we're going to learn. But today, Vince, when you look at this group, even though new coordinator, new safeties coach, you lost 2 starters to the NFL at defensive end, you lost an All-American linebacker, you lost another cornerback to the NFL who's doing pretty good right now for the Buffalo Bills. Nick McLeod's having a really good camp, had an interception in their last scrimmage. You lose Sean Crawford. There's a lot of question marks around this defense, but for some reason, this entire offseason, I've just had a sense of peace that at the very least, this defense is going to keep doing what it's been doing in recent seasons.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of known commodities that are on this defense that we feel like we know what they're going to be. Even if we think that they're going to take another step, or maybe they might be in a new position like Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa, I still have a lot of confidence in MTA, even though he's at a new position. I think he might be at the right position for him now as well, and the game that he plays. And I am more confident in what the Will linebacker is going to bring to this defense. I'm more confident in what the Mike linebacker is going to bring to this defense because of the Will linebacker, right? I'm confident that Kyle Hamilton's going to take another step. I mean, there's a lot of areas where I don't necessarily have question marks, although my question mark is, man, what could this defense look like in a good way, And I feel like Marcus Freeman, as the new defensive coordinator, he's walking into a situation where, we know that he knows his X's and O's. We know that he is good at developing talent. We know that he can take I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I'm going to say it, and you can take it how you want, but he can take inferior talent and turn it into
relative to Notre Dame.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But turn it into a great team defense, whether that's schematically, whether that's coaching guys up, all of that. And now he walks into a place like Notre Dame where arguably across the board, he's got better pieces to put into his defensive puzzle. And he's just got to be laying in bed at night like, yeah, what can I do with these guys? What can we do to, mess with some offenses like that? That's how I feel about this defense. I feel like Marcus Freeman is kind of he's playing chess, and he's got all these awesome pieces, and he's going to be able to move them around. And my anticipation is very positive and very high to see how he moves those pieces around and what they look like. So while I'm very confident in the defense, I still have questions as to what they're going to look like as a group under Marcus Freeman.
Vince, you're saying that as an analyst sitting at home. Dang well if you were still coaching and you were in Marcus Freeman's shoes, that whole laying at night like this, that happened a month ago. You're now 2 weeks out. Now you're like, my gosh, are we ready? Have we done enough? Do we have this in? You know what I mean? Like
absolutely. It's when he walked in the door.
That's right. Yeah. That's that part of camp you're at. Hey, look, and then as you get into game week, you're like, okay, yeah, we're good to go. But yeah, he's at that point in time where it's like, okay, what are we really going to do? And I think the defensive staff has a lot of confidence, because one of the things I was told by a couple sources was that in the middle of fall camp, they started kind of pulling guys out. Hey, let's rest this guy, let's rest that guy. You don't do that if you're not happy with the direction you're going in camp. And so especially up front, I've heard that a lot about the D-line. So that's a good thing. That tells me again that they like where they're at. They think that they're in a good place. And I guess I'm at that point now where it's like all my confidence is still there, but it's I just have more questions now as we get closer and closer to the season. And when you look at the things I'm most confident in, however, it is that I do believe that Marcus Freeman will have this defense rolling at a very high level at some point this season.
Yes, agreed.
The flip side of my question is, okay, is there going to be growing pains? Mm-hmm. Is there going to take time for this group to kind of get on the same page, for guys learning? Because there are guys learning new positions, as you mentioned. The Vipers are being asked to do things they weren't asked to do in the past. Myron Tagovailoa is a new spot. The linebackers are being asked to do some things they didn't do in the past. The coverage schemes are a little bit different. There's going to be a lot more press coverage and aggressive coverages than there was last year, when it was a lot of off coverage and safe coverages and things like that. So then you look at it and say, okay, well, how's Kyle Hamilton going to adapt to being the guy? Last year, he was the other guy, you know what I mean? With Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Now he is the guy. How's he going to handle that? How are teams going to game plan for him? So there's a lot of those question marks that still have to be answered. And I think that's, to me, where I'm at with the defense now is it's an excitement, but it's an excitement from the unknown. I still don't know what we're going to see with certain things. But the things that I'm not worried about is I feel like in at least 3 spots, this defensive line is set to be really, really good. I think at the 3 technique, when you look at Jason Adamiola, I think he's going to be a bust out. I look at Riley Mills. It's great to hear he's having a great camp. One of the intel pieces we put out on the message board at Irish Breakdown was before fall camp was, look, Riley did not have a good spring camp. And there were some questions that, hey, he might get beat out by a couple other guys. And then he responded to that. My understanding is that Riley knew that. He responded to that by having a great fall camp from what we've been told. And then what you guys saw with your own eyes.
Yeah, what we saw Thursday was,
because what can happen, Vince, and you know this, is we get to see 2 out of 25 two out of 2 full practices. So like you're only going to see team twice, right? So you can see, we guys had 6 practices, all the individual and stretch. That stuff doesn't tell you a thing. If a guy doesn't look good in individual, he shouldn't be on scholarship at the University of Notre Dame, right?
100% agree with
that.
If
a guy doesn't look good in team takeoff, he should be playing at Indiana State, not Notre Dame. Okay, so of course they're going to look good. We haven't seen team periods. We've seen like 2 1-on-1s, 2 7-on-7s. That's it. So a guy could have a great practice and say, wow, so-and-so looks great. But in reality, that was like one of only 2 good practices he's had all fall camp. Or a guy can have a bad practice and he's like, oh, this guy struggled. But like that's the only off day he's had all fall camp. We don't know the answers to that. So part of this, we have to rely on sources. And so while you guys have been in practice, I've been trying to do some digging and talking to sources. And so when I'm hearing Riley's name consistently of, wow, this guy's really stepping up, I think that's impactful. And I think part of the reason Riley is stepping up is because of Jason Adamiola. He set that bar so high. It's like, hey, if you guys want to get on the field, you better do something because this dude is a monster. Like right now, what's my justification for taking him off the field and putting you on the field? Right? Okay. All right. I see you, coach. I'll show you why you should also play me. And then Riley laces. It's kind of like I remember interviewing Alex Bars a few years ago, and he talked about how when he played with Quentin Nelson, it's kind of like you knew every day there was a standard you had to try to live up to because of Quentin. And when I look at this defensive line and I see Jason Adamiola, who's a monster talent, and then I see beside him 2 captains, Kurt Heinisch and Myron Tungvaloa-Mosa, 2 starters who are captains. It's like, there's a bar being raised with that group that says you need to match it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's partly where my confidence comes from up front at those 3 spots, the 3 technique, the nose, and the big end. The one spot where I still have some question marks is the Viper.
Sure.
I feel like the expectations on Isaiah Foskey have gone past what they should be for this season, especially early. My expectation have not changed. I think he's going to flash. I think he's going to have some really impressive moments. But my concern is he starting to feel that pressure?
Yeah.
That's a question that I have. And are they going to then – will the coaches start getting impatient with him because their expectations are higher than they should be?
Right.
And Marcus Freeman said something at the very beginning where he talked about everybody tells me that Foskey should be a first-round pick and all that. I don't expect Isaiah Foskey to play like a first-round pick this year. I expect him to flash the talent of a first-round pick. But if he doesn't let Matt live up to that standard, are they going to get impatient with him? Are they going to play other guys more because those guys are at least more steady, even though they're not as high upside? Mm-hmm. Those are the questions that sometimes concern me going into this time of the year. So even though I'm really confident in the other 3 positions and the depth, the Vipers still have some, we're still hearing that just Jordan Patel is working with the 3rd team. Why? Why, after working with the 2nd team and having a great spring, is he not playing as well? Is he injured? Is there something to the stuff that was discussed this offseason? Is it just because Justin Adamiola is playing so great? Those are all questions that to me leave enough concern in the back of my mind, Vince, to say I'm not quite sure what we're going to get from the Viper position this year.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And everything, obviously we talk as media members when we're at practice, and that's kind of the prevailing thought is that Isaiah Foskey isn't living up to those expectations. But the problem is I think those expectations are a little high, like you said. because he hasn't really flashed at practice. Now, the one practice we were at, right.
That's the other problem. It's like
exactly, but that's what we get to see. So of course we have to form opinions based on what we see, etc. But
which is the one problem with open availability.
Exactly,
is people start formulating big picture opinions from very small. I mean, if you think of the number of reps that they've taken now, they're getting close to by the end of the week they'll be at like practice 20. And you guys have seen,
so this is today. Today is technically practice 14.
Right.
You
sure about that?
Well, that's what it says on the email.
Okay, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. So then they're not going to get to their 25 practices by the first game of the season.
Yeah, today's 14, tomorrow's 15.
Okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I wonder. Well, they've sent us a lot of incorrect information this year so far. So
they said that Thursday the full open practice was 12, and then today is 14. So that means they only had one practice between Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday,
and that's not accurate.
So,
okay, so so they're beyond 14.
Yeah,
but still, they're going to by the end of the week, as I said, they're going to be around 20, and so. How many team reps do you think they've taken this so far in camp? How many one-on-ones have they taken? Right.
Hundreds.
And then what percentage of that have you guys actually seen?
Right. Very small.
That's the issue with, so-and-so didn't look good in this one practice we got to see.
Right.
But I think sometimes the problem becomes more the expectations. But my concern is sometimes coaches can fall victim to that as well. And that's my – look, we all have done that where one guy's playing better than you think and another guy's not playing as good as you think. So you start to say, well, maybe I'm just going to go with this guy. When in reality, if you just got rid of the expectations, this other guy's still playing better.
Yeah.
You know?
And the other thing is that the one practice that we saw, Brian, was they were clearly working on the Viper in coverage. And so it wasn't a pass rush practice. It just wasn't. And so, he's not going to
had somebody tell me after that practice and this is why I was glad that you were there because you told me that we hardly ever saw him pass rush, and when he did, it was up the middle. Because I had somebody call me and say, "Hey, I heard from somebody that Foskey wasn't getting any pressure on the quarterback." Like that's how it goes, right? I'm like, it's kind of hard to do that when you're dropping into coverage. You know what I mean?
He was in space. That's when I noticed him. Is when he was in space, and it was
the point being, however, is I think that the narrative is to me is something I'm concerned about.
Sure,
but beyond that, I'm actually more concerned about what level of play are we going to get from that position this year, and if it does struggle, what do they do? Do they, so those are the things that I think are interesting in a storyline that I expect this defensive line still to be great. That position, however, to me is going to determine whether it's going to be a really good defensive line or an elite defensive line.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's three guys there. I mean, it's Foskey, it's Adam Yola, Justin, and then Patelho. Two of those guys have to play at a high level. I don't care which two, but they need two of them to do it. And if they do, then I think that group will be just fine because it's still a very talented group.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Well, and another question that I have concerning the defensive line before we move on to another group is Justin, from what we have seen, so I will preface it with that, what we have seen, Justin has been working exclusively as the number 2 Viper. I guess I'm interested to see when they go to kind of that backup or whoever comes in for MTA, right? Is it going to be Justin or is it going to be Nana, right? Like that. Is he being cross-trained as like the next man in, like the 6th man offensive lineman?
Or will it be Riley Mills?
Right. So those kind of questions are still in mind. What's that
Alexander Ahrensberger?
Like? Right. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, and that goes more towards what Marcus Freeman kind of wants to do and what he sees from these guys. Right. And so, that's what I'm going to be keeping my eye on the most, I think, on September 5th is what does that rotation look like when that next group comes in? Are they going to go with a 4? Are they going to go with a 3? Are they going to bump Riley Mills out to big end? Which I think is a great idea, by the way, just as an aside. That's where I'm interested to see. Is it a straight 2s, that we've been seeing, or is there going to be some variation in there?
And I don't think that's what we're going to see from I think Marcus Freeman's thinking outside the box a lot. I think there's going to be times we may see Jason Adamiyola out there, just depending on what they can do.
A lot of versatility with this group.
I think by the end of the year, we're going to have to really rethink how we identify positions in this defense. I just that's a prediction that I have, right? So yeah, that's where the defensive line and again, I still expect it to be at least a very good group. I want to make sure people are clear on that. I still expect to be a very good defense. We're just now talking about, okay, now that we're getting close to the season, let's talk about what could be the difference between it being very good and it being elite.
Right.
And it's that Viper spot to me that's the big question mark. And then if Jordan Patello and Foskey start balling, does that then say, okay, now we can start using Justin more as a big end?
Right.
And so those are all the things that we're going to find out here But from what I'm told, Vince, is what we've seen in practice is you've seen him, Justin, as primarily Viper. That's what I'm told that's happening when we're not there.
Okay.
So now is that just them doing that just to make sure that he can get ready for Viper because they already know that he can play big end? That's another question that we got to find out. So again, this is what makes this time of the year fun, right? And I wish I was at practice every day and I didn't have these question marks, but we're not there every day, and so we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I wish we were there every day. Yeah.
So my confidence level in the defense I want to make sure has not changed in the defensive line. It has not changed. It's just more of a setting an expectation for the what it's going to be,
for reality,
what it can be, what it will be, and then also saying, okay, here, this is also sort of what I'm looking for.
Sure.
So as we get into the Florida State game, the Toledo game, the Purdue game, these are the things I'm going to be looking for. What's the second level? What's the second unit doing when they're in the game?
Right.
What's happening at Viper? How are they using the big end position when Myron's on the bench? All those things are more of a here's what we're looking to see. You want to know what to watch when the game starts on Sunday, September 5th? That's something right there that we need to be looking for. I think the other thing, too, for me, Vince, is I'm a lot more confident at linebacker now than I was when fall camp kicked off.
Yeah.
And a big you've mentioned two of them already. What you have seen and then what we've heard from sources about Drew White and Maris Luafau has me a lot more, okay, I think they're going to be good. I think it'll be pretty good than where I was.
Yeah.
We thought, like we said, we think it can be good, but it was a big question mark. I'm a lot more confident in that group now than I was when fall camp started.
Well, and I think for me, the confidence level is higher for a couple of reasons. Number one, what we've seen from Maris, in the spring and in the fall. We saw him basically take over the first practice that we were there, and it was very impressive and with everything that he was doing. Another reason for me, and I'll stay with the will. So another reason at the will position is J.D. Bertrand has played exceptionally well, and Maris is still a 1. And that tells me that J.D. is pushing and pushing and pushing, and Maris is reacting, and is still that number 1 even after all of that. So that makes me very happy. That's a great 1-2 punch, I think, right now at will. And then as far as Drew White is concerned, look, we saw a very, very productive Drew White in 2019. And so we know that Drew White can be productive at the mic. But
we saw a really productive Drew White he had more tackles for loss last year than did the year before.
Sure, absolutely.
That's the thing that is intriguing, Vince. I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt because
it's a good point.
He had more tackles in 2019.
Right.
He had more tackles for loss last year, but he also played a lot fewer snaps and one fewer game. So even on fewer snaps, he still had more tackles for loss.
Sure.
So the production's been there. It's the consistency of production. You go watch him one game and he looks like $1 million, and then you go watch him against Alabama and you're like, why is this guy on the field?
Right.
That was the concern with Drew last year. There's just more of those highs and lows where when he was good, he was really good. When he was down, he was a liability.
Right.
And then you had another liability at will linebacker. It was just flat out, outside of 2 games, it was a liability all year. It was not a liability against South Florida, and it was not a liability the first time against Clemson.
Yep. I do feel like part of that was because I feel like Drew was trying to cover for the will linebacker. I do feel that was part of his inconsistency. And from what I saw in the 2 practices that we were able to see 11 on 11, a little bit of team stuff, he's all around the football. He's not worried about the will right now because the will is locked down. And Drew is able to play Drew's style of football, and Drew is around the football all the time. And, he's not going to be a headline guy. He's just not, because that's not his personality. That's not the way he is necessarily. But he's going to be around the football. He's going to be making plays. And, it's funny to me, though, also, Brian, is that we are spending a lot of time talking about the Will and the Mike. We don't talk about the Rover that often because of how confident we are in what Jack Kaiser is going to be able to do at the Rover position.
Jack Kaiser, and I also think that part of that for me, Vince, is my confidence in Marcus Freeman.
Sure.
That he's going to find what Isaiah Pryor is good at and give him a chance to do that.
And like I said last practice, Isaiah Pryor flashed. He was flying around the football. Let
me ask you a question. How many snaps did you see of him in coverage during team stuff?
0 or not many. That's the thing. He was flying to the football.
Right.
And if you call pass coverage, getting out into the flat and nailing down a guy who caught a screen pass, that's different, right? I mean, that's just him going downhill, finding the football, making a play, right? And that's where you take advantage of his athleticism. He's not taking drops and, doing those kinds of things. And so I agree with you. I think that's where Isaiah Pryor is going to be at his best, and Marcus Freeman is going to find that. And that's so far what we've seen, and no question about it. And it's been great to see because Isaiah Pryor is an athlete you want on the field, right? But you can't. Right. You don't want to put him in a position to fail, obviously, but he is a guy you can take advantage of his skill set.
Right.
And I think that they're going to do that a little bit more this year.
We have a super chat here real quick, Vince.
Woo!
Mark has managed. Thank you for that, Mark. Appreciate the super chat. And he says, what is the biggest change from last year to this year that leads to confidence for Houston Griffith to finally reach his potential, other than the new DC? So, Mark, we are going to get to that here in a second, but I did want to I wanted to get his super chat up because we're going to kick off this next section about that. But I did want to first finish up on the linebacker thing. From everything that we've been told, Vince, Shane Simon's better now than he was last year.
Yeah.
Right? Not a lot, but better. And he's battling to get on the field. Not start, get on the field.
Yeah.
And I think part of that, we haven't heard much about Bo Bauer. I've heard Bo's had a solid camp, but Drew White's doing what you'd hope a veteran captain 2-year starter would do. And so those are the things to me. And then, I was told by a source before fall camp started that the coaches felt Maris Luafau was the linebacker that had the highest potential, the highest upside of anybody on that roster at linebacker, which is just saying a whole lot, And I have this friend of mine who literally calls me every day at 1:00, knowing that I'm in the podcast. I tell him every day, "Hey, dude, we do a podcast," and he still calls. So I got my sorry about that. I got my. So anyway, but you look at the linebacker position, and to me, that's kind of more my confidence. Is like, look here as a coach that somebody's going to start, right? It's just, is it someone starting because somebody seized hold of it or somebody was the best option?
Right.
And what I like about what we're seeing from this football team right now is at linebacker, we're seeing guys seize hold of jobs.
Yes.
That's mine.
Yes.
No, I'm not going to be, that's Maris. That's Drew White. That's Jack Kaiser. The second part is we're seeing guys say, no, I'm not content being third string. I don't care if you started last year. I'm coming for you. That's JD Bertrand. And that's where you want to be as a unit is, hey, this, Paul Moalo is a good football player, but he's battling to get on the field because of how well Jack Kaiser and Isaiah Pryor. That's where you want to be.
Absolutely.
Bo Bauer was poised for a breakout in many people's minds, but right now he's the number 2 Mike linebacker. Why? Not because Bo's not playing well. It's because Drew has said, nope, this is mine. I got this. Right. And so that's where my confidence level in this unit has just really skyrocketed, Vince, is just, I see a group that is just significantly better than it was last year. In my, it's a sort of a prediction, but it's what we've also seen. Because look, when we didn't see practices last year, right? But when you watch the games, it was pretty obvious that Will Linebacker was a liability.
Yes.
I don't know what was happening in practice. I had a couple sources tell me that, no, that's pretty much what you see every day from Shane Simon. And he just it was a mystery to a lot of people that I know why he started last year.
And that's what I've seen from him at practice this year. I've seen him get washed out and, not coming downhill the way he needs to come downhill. That's what I've seen as well. This practice, this season in the fall. And again, it's a snapshot, but it backs up everything that we're being told and everything that we saw in games last year.
Right.
Very similar. So I guess I'm not all that surprised, but very happy that JD and Marist are doing what they're supposed to do, or what they're doing currently, to seize hold of that job. So, do I feel bad for Shane Simon? To a degree. He was a starter. He's probably not going to be a starter anymore. But
at least based on what we've seen. Now, again, the light could go on for Shane. Here's the thing about Shane, though, is he's talented enough and athletic enough to where if the light goes on,
look out.
He's gonna change the narrative a little bit.
Sure.
So that's also something that I say we need to be a little mindful of, because he could quickly change that narrative real fast.
Yeah, that's fair.
Real fast. So linebacker, we know where we're at secondary wise. I think safety, we'll talk about Kyle Hamilton when we get into the MVP section, I'm sure. I still feel like the bigger storyline is what happens next. And that's where we kind of get back to Mark's question. We'll bring that up again. He goes, what's the biggest change from last year to this year that leads to confidence for Houston Griffith to finally reach his potential, other than the new DC? And to me, it's not just if the new DC, I'll say this. If Marcus Freeman came to Notre Dame, made the same phone calls to Houston Griffith that he made, and the position coach was the same, Houston Griffith isn't playing at Notre Dame right now. I think it's the combination of that plus a new position coach, and Chris O'Leary being someone that Houston and a lot of the players knew and respected and wanted as a position coach.
Right.
I think it's that combination. You needed a wholesale change for Houston to, number one, come back, and number two, to have all the barriers broken down to where you could say, hey, look, man, there's no one else to blame anymore. It's up to you now. And I think so far Houston has seized hold of that.
Yeah, and I will give you some empirical evidence to that as well. We've seen Kyle Hamilton's reps limited in fall practice, due to the fact that he's coming off surgery, obviously in the spring, and in recovery from that. And, he's been battling a few minor things, and there's no point in getting your All-American a bunch of reps. Like, he knows what he's supposed to do. So, that's okay. But because of that, Houston Griffith is now kind of the de facto leader in the defensive secondary during practice. And what I've seen with my own eyes, right? I've seen the leadership from Houston Griffith vocally. I've seen it physically, getting in the front of lines, being that guy. He's putting people in the right positions in the defensive secondary. He's talking to guys. The communication is great. Like, I don't remember now. Again, didn't see practice last year, but I don't remember hearing the voice of Houston Griffith in the past. Okay, and so guys don't talk unless they're confident. They just don't. And you might hear trash talking. That's not the talk I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about, hey, you need to be here. You need to be there. Calling out coverages, calling out offensive plays on the defensive side. Like, that's what I'm hearing from Houston Griffith. And then he's backing it up with his play as well, at least in practice. So that's the difference for me. I'm seeing him just carry himself with more confidence. I'm hearing more confidence, and I'm seeing it. And so that leads me to be, just a, lack of a thesaurus in front of me, to be more confident in what Houston Griffith is going to bring to the table as that extra safety, that second safety next to Kyle Hamilton.
To me, it's about opportunity. And I think that's what Marcus Freeman and Chris O'Leary have provided him, an opportunity for a fresh start. An opportunity to say, hey, look, the mistakes you've made in the past are gone. I'm not worried about those anymore.
It's clean slate.
The things that you feel may have been done to you that were outside of your control, those things are gone. It's not a conversation anymore. The head coach, the defensive coordinator, the position coach all expressed the desire to have you as part of the football team. They've now given you an opportunity to say, hey, we're going to judge you on who you are from now moving forward. That's hard to do if you don't have a new position coach. That's hard to do when the person that's there is the same one that you, right or wrong, felt was the person keeping me from reaching my potential. Not me, him. Well, it's okay. Look,
that doesn't exist.
Do you think we have a personal issue with you as well for some reason that no one can explain? Or is it, hey, look, that's gone. That's in the past. All that's in the past is time to go. Yeah. Now, I don't expect Houston to be an All-American this year. I don't expect him to play like a first-round draft pick. I just think he's going to be a steady, solid, good football player.
That's all he needs to be. Yeah,
right,
that's
exactly.
what he needs to be.
Explain why. Explain why, because it's been a while since we talked about it. Explain why Houston just being a good, solid, consistent football player is so important for this football team.
Because you need to be able to count on Houston Griffith to do his job so that Kyle Hamilton can do his job. And you can use Kyle Hamilton to the best of his ability, moving him around the defense. Because remember, last year, you had Kyle Hamilton on one side of the defense, and you had, I don't know, a Buckus Award winner on the other side of the defense. And so it was kind of like brackets, like, okay, pick your poison. Which side are you going to go to, right? Well, this year, now you've got Kyle Hamilton, right? He's the known commodity. And so, look, Marcus Freeman, like, he's the ultimate, and to go back to the chess analogy, he's the ultimate queen on the chessboard. Like, he's the guy that you want to use in all these different ways. You can put him on the line of scrimmage. You can put him at the second level. You can have him play center field. You can have him blitz. You can have him covering a slot if you wanted to. I mean, there's a million different things you can do with Kyle Hamilton if the other safety is a guy that you can trust to do his job. If he's not doing his job, well, now you need Kyle Hamilton to kind of stay back and be kind of an old school safety where he's kind of covering center field all the time. Yeah, he might play the alleys and things like that, but he needs to cover for the guy who's next to him. Right, kind of a la what Drew White was doing at linebacker, covering for the will. Right. Well, if you can trust that Houston Griffith is doing his job, that just opens up just a world of possibilities for what you can do with Kyle Hamilton. And again, you can also do a lot of fun things with Houston Griffith too, because of what Kyle Hamilton can do. Right, because they're going to test three. Why would you not, right? I mean, if you're going to go up the middle, if you're going to be doing certain things, you're going to test the non-Kyle Hamilton player. Right. So Houston Griffith's going to get plenty of opportunities here to do some special things. There's no question about it. Mm-hmm. But this defense is at its best when Kyle Hamilton can be moved around and played with. And you need Houston Griffith to be steady, at the very least steady, so that you can do that.
And I'd go beyond that. I think they need more than just Houston Griffith to step up. I think they need at least two more guys, because you need at least one more guy, ideally two more. And what I mean by that is you can't just have Houston and Kyle, because otherwise those guys are going to have to come off field at some point in time.
Right.
What happens when they do? Is it kind of like a deal where we saw in Clemson in 2018 when Julian Love came off the field and they went right at Dante Vaughn? Our team's going to say, hey, look, GA, spotter, analyst, whoever's responsible for that, let me know when 14's not on the field.
Right.
Let me know when 3's not on the field. Mm-hmm. And when we do that, here's our package for that. And that's what good offensive coordinators are going to do.
Absolutely.
You're going to say, hey, look, if it's a team that's a heavy rotation team, when so-and-so's on the field, number one, we know they're going to be less aggressive maybe in coverage, but number two, we know there's ways we can formationally get that guy in coverage, and we're going to go after him. And those are things that teams will do to say, hey, look, yeah, Notre Dame has the best safety in the country. Their number two safety is a pretty good football player. But if their number 3 and number 4 safeties can't play and are liabilities, then it's going to hurt them. Mm-hmm. So those are issues. And so what if something happens and Kyle gets ejected again in the middle of a game when Houston's already in the lineup, right?
Right.
What if Kyle gets hurt again? Look, he was battling an ankle injury. What if it's more severe this time?
Sure.
So those are the things you say is like, look, you can't just have one guy at a position anymore, because there's so much that can happen with the targeting rule, with injuries, with COVID. All those different things going on. You could have a guy, you could think you're going to have a guy, and then on Friday he tests positive and for COVID and he's out. You know what I mean? Well, what are you going to do? That's the big concern for me at safety is if Houston plays well, I think the starting safeties are going to be fine, but they're going to need DJ Brown to be a better football player this year. They're going to need somebody, KJ Wallace, Litchfield Agevon, Justin Walters, a corner that moves there. They're going to need somebody to step up and play there this year besides those two. And that, to me, is probably the biggest question mark I have on this team from a total overall standpoint. I think there are other questions on defense, Vince, but for me, that one is beyond the starters. That's the biggest question mark that I have.
Well, and we've talked about this a bunch. I apologize. I'm looking down because I'm just looking at the roster here at all the DBs that are on here. And we have talked a lot about the lack of depth, the lack of perceived depth at the safety position. And somebody is going to have to step up. I thought DJ Brown has played fine up to this point. Again, small window. I've been very impressed with KJ Wallace, what he's been doing when he's had an opportunity to get out there. If I'm not mistaken, he's been kind of running with that second group, which means he's impressing, Coach O'Leary and Coach Freeman as well. So I don't know if that's good and bad because you've got a true freshman that's now rolling with the twos, and we know that you're going to dip into the twos at safety. You just are. It's just from a rotation standpoint, and so. How confident are you putting a true freshman out there in the back of that defense, right? And so, like Brian said, to echo what he said, whoever's going to be spotting, they see 16 get out there. Oh, true freshman, let's pick on that kid. It sounds like there may be that opportunity, and how is he going to rise to the challenge? So that is a huge question mark. What is that going to look like? And we've talked about DJ Brown in the past. He's a solid football player. He's nothing amazing. Right? He can go in there, and I think he can hold things down, and I think he has been doing that in the fall. But could he be a liability when he's out there? It's possible.
It depends on how much he has to play.
Exactly, right. And so if there's an injury to either one of those number one guys, I think we're having a different conversation here, and so that is a worry. That is a question. And so we're going to have to see how things play out, of course. But this is the one spot where I'm not confident in the depth just yet until I see a little bit more on game day, if that's fair.
Yeah, let's transition to cornerback, because I think what happens at cornerback this season is going to have a great impact on the present and future at safety. What I mean by that is there's a kid playing field corner right now named Clarence Lewis, who's expected to start at corner. He's a good football player. Whether it's this year or next year, I still believe that Clarence Lewis's best path to being a professional football player is as a safety, not a corner. That's just my opinion. I think his game is better suited for that. The somewhat liabilities that he has are negated if he's playing safety over corner. And I think the strengths that he has as a player are accented as a safety more than as a corner. That doesn't mean he's not their second best corner right now.
Right.
Because clearly he is. But I feel like if Tariq Bracy can prove himself this season and say, hey, you're going to come out and play well in games, not in practice, in games.
Right.
If Ramon Henderson can step up and be a guy that you can count on, if one or two of the freshmen step up and prove to be a guy that you can count on, that may be the answer if there's an injury at safety. It may be, look, who's our next best DB? Well, our next best DB, for example, is actually Ramon Henderson or Ryan Barnes or Phillip Riley or Chance Tucker or JoJo Johnson or Caleb Offord. If it's somebody like that, then you may say, hey, you know what? We're all about getting our best guys on the field, right? So if our next best DB is Ramon Henderson, let's just say the light goes on for Ramon. Brian Kelly's praised him. We've always said that the athleticism is there. Is he a football player or not? That's the question with Ramon Henderson. Right. He's 6'1 plus. He had great track times in high school. Can that turn into him being a good football player? We don't know the answer to that. But if it does, that could eventually be your answer. That could not only be your answer for this year, but that could be your answer moving forward too.
Sure.
Is, okay, now, yes, you lose Kyle Hamilton to the NFL. You're not going to have another Kyle Hamilton on the football team next year, so don't act like you have one. But now all of a sudden you put a guy like Clarence Lewis next to Houston Griffith, and, okay, I feel really good about that. But that requires other players stepping up a corner. And that's the other big question mark on this defense is cornerback. Are they going to get good enough play cornerback to allow this football team to take advantage of that depth? Because it's one thing to have depth from a number standpoint. It's another thing to have depth from a quality of play standpoint. that to me is a much bigger question mark for Notre Dame.
Right.
Is your depth, does depth equal good play?
Right.
And we won't know the answer to that till we get to games.
Absolutely. And because I think there's a lot of talent in the depth chart at corner. And I'm not saying there's not talent at safety, but there's more talent at the corner.
Let's be honest, it's not just, as look, we don't have to protect people's feelings. There's more talent.
There's more talent at corner.
You go after number one.
Right.
You get down to the 4th, 5th, 6th cornerback. I'm sorry. It's just it's there's more confidence there. There's more depth there than there is in safety. It just is.
Yeah. And look, there's not a lot of returning production at corner, but there's talent at corner. Mm-hmm. And so I'm confident in the depth at corner. I just need to see it. I mean, we just need to see who's going to step up, who's going to be that guy, who's going to do what. In this rotation at corner, what's that going to look like? But I love what that room looks like. I love it. And it's only going to get better, as we move forward. But for this year, I still feel that there's plenty of talent at corner. And I think it's going to come to fruition, during the season. I really do. I'm high on
right.
Look, we know
high on it, but like you said, we've got to see it.
Yeah, I need to see it.
And that's the other part of the cornerback position, right? So we'll kind of segue away from how corner can help safety and kind of get back to, okay, how's this going to help the Notre Dame football team, right? At corner. And that's where the Cam Hart conversation comes into play. How good's Cam Hart going to be?
You're right.
Right? I mean, look, you've talked about how great, Kevin Austin's making great plays. And all. Well, look, Kevin Austin's not the only really good receiver that Cam Hart's going to face this year.
Absolutely.
He's going to face, some good athletes at Florida State. Not the talent that people think is there. He's going to face a heck of a receiver against Purdue. Now, at times, David Bell's going to move all over. It won't be David Bell versus Cam Hart all day. But there will be times he's going to be matched up against him. He's going to be matched up against Milton Wright from Purdue at times. Good football player. You look at you get to Cincinnati, Alec Pierce. You get to USC, Drake London. Again, he won't be matched up against Drake London all the time. Drake London plays a lot in the slot, but there's going to be guys at times. He's going to be matched up against some good football players. He's going to have to step up, make plays. He's going to have to be consistent. He's going to have to make more plays on the ball. Just being in coverage is fine, but at some point in time, you got to start making plays on the ball. Right. Now, the things we hear about Cam are great. I hear nothing but great things about Cam. You say you saw him at practice. You like what he does. I mean, nobody else is beating him except for Kevin Austin.
Exactly.
So you get into those kind of things and say, boy, but what does that mean? Kevin Austin is ready to be great, or does that just mean Cam Hart's not as good? And that's the thing I hate about camp in college, Vince, is you don't really know, are we just really that good, or is the other side of the ball not good? And you don't know the answer to that until you get the game, start playing other teams.
Right.
And so that's one of the things that
counts.
Yeah. That's one of the things that can be a tad nerve-wracking. Part of it, because you've said, hey, look, I can evaluate this compared to what we've been in the past, and we're better there or not as good or whatever. But there's still a little bit of that, And I can tell you with confidence that there were coaches at Notre Dame in 2017 that were a little nervous about their defense going into the 2017 season, just because they okay, are we really that good on the offensive line? Are we really that good at running the football that we can't stop them ever? Then you found out, they are.
Yeah.
They are that good. So to me, Cam is still a bit of an unknown commodity. It's
sure. Absolutely.
We talk about him as if it was it's no brainer that Cam's going to be good. And I'm not going to be shocked if Cam's good, but we still need to see it, right? I mean, and that's where I guess I have a little bit more trepidation about the defense than maybe I should, based on recent successes, because there are some unknown commodities at some pretty important positions, safety and corner.
Sure.
And that's where, if you play a team that maybe can protect the quarterback, that maybe can win some battles that you're not expecting to win from the front four and the front seven, do they have the cover players to make up for that? That to me still remains arguably the biggest question about this entire football team. Because you can be great in the front seven, but as we saw against Clemson in the 2018 Cotton Bowl, if a team can rip off 4 or 5 big plays, your great play up front gets negated, and they can get 30 points like that. A 9-3 game turns into a 23-3 game in 2 minutes, literally less than 2 minutes of game time. And that's the one. Okay, we'll see. It's not. I guess I shouldn't say concern, Vince, but more of an unknown.
Yeah. exactly. Because I'm confident. It's just I'm
confident in the talent.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not confident that it's gonna. I'm not confident that it's gonna play that way until we see it. That's the big thing for me. We need to see it.
You ready to give away some awards here or some predictions?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay,
let's do it.
So let's start with the most obvious one. We'll start with MVP, and you kind of already gave it away a minute ago.
I gave yours away.
Oh, look at you. Look, I'll take the softball here, and I'll crush it out of the ballpark. I'll take Kyle Hamilton as my MVP. Preseason All-American. He's going to end up being a regular All-American. He's going to be a consensus All-American, in my opinion. Wait, which one's when it's all the services? Is it consensus or is it unanimous? Okay,
unanimous.
I think he's going to be unanimous All-American. I really do believe that. He's already got the pub going into the season, which helps
important
with that kind of thing because it just does. And he's gonna play well. So he's my MVP on the defensive side of the ball, and there's other guys that I could have gone with, but I'll take the softball on this one. It's Kyle Hamilton.
I'm not going to take Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, because you wouldn't.
I'm going Jason Adamiola.
Yeah, that's your
Here's
boy.
why I'm going to say that. Number one, I think the defensive line is going to be the best part of this defense, and I think his numbers are going to be to the point where it's like, wow, like Sheldon Day type of tackle for loss numbers. That's just my prediction. The other part is I think the fact that everything you just said about Kyle Hamilton is true, and every opponent Notre Dame faces is gonna
they know that. Absolutely, right? They're gonna know that.
And I think part of the reason I don't have Kyle being the MVP is because I think teams are gonna avoid him a lot. Which then you could argue you can make it, but that's also what makes him the MVP because teams have to game plan around him so much and all that kind of stuff. So maybe I'm going more of a most outstanding as opposed to an MVP. But I'm going with Jason Adamiola because I don't care how good Kyle Hamilton is. If the front four doesn't play to its potential, this team will not reach its peak on defense. I don't care how good Kyle Hamilton is. We saw that last year. It didn't matter how good Kyle and Jeremiah Wusu were. When the front four didn't play well, the defense got beat. When the front four played well, the defense was great.
They ate.
Right? Yeah. And look, so to me, that's why this unit is important, and I think he's going to end up being the most outstanding of that group. Cool. You could, I think, also make a case for Myron Tagovailoa-Mosa as again, MVP is different than most outstanding, and so maybe I'm cheating a little bit, and I'm leaning more towards the most outstanding than the MVP, because value is different than outstanding. But I'm going with Jason Adamiola for that, Vince, as my MVP. So I just want to try to think a little bit outside the box on that one. Again, it's not saying he's going to be their best player. He won't be their highest drafted player. It's about value. Right. And if the defensive line doesn't play at an elite level, this defense is not going to play championship football. Next one is breakout. And breakout is someone who either was a backup or was a starter. A backup that kind of becomes an impact starter, not just someone who's backup that becomes a starter, but somebody who's a backup that becomes an impact starter, or a guy who was a starter and a good player becomes a great player. So that's the criteria, Vince. So who is your breakout player for 2021?
So I had two in my head, but I feel like as the self-appointed, president of the Cam Hart fan club, I have to go Cam Hart.
I wrote down who I think your answers are going to be, and I had Cam on that one. Yeah.
And I was thinking about Jack Kaiser because I think he's going to have a really good year as well. And I think he's going to have a lot of people talking, but I think that Cam Hart's going to end up being the number one corner. I think he's going to be locking dudes down. I think he's going to have a great season. And so it's got to be Cam Hart for me.
I'm going Maris Luafau. That's my breakout.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to have two guys or one guy winning two awards. You could also make a case that if Jason Adamiola plays to the level we think he's a breakout because he's never had the production.
Yeah, you're right.
But I already have him at one spot. So that's the only – I thought maybe you might go that way too with him. But I'm going Maris. I think Maris is going to carry his strong fall camp into the season and be a breakout player for Notre Dame this year. Next award is bounce back, a guy that was maybe injured or a guy that maybe didn't play well last year that you expect to bounce back and be a really important part to this football team this year.
Well, for me, that's Drew White. And I know that you brought up the numbers as, he had more tackles for loss, et cetera.
But his play wasn't good.
But his play wasn't great. Yeah. And I feel like he's going to bounce back. And I think he's going to end up being a very, very, very important part of what this defense is doing. He's in the middle of the defense, right? He's the middle linebacker. Middle linebacker has to have a good year for this defense to be good. And I feel like Drew White, from what I've seen so far in practice, he has taken hold of that spot and he's not letting it go. And he's doing it with his play. And I love it. And so Drew White.
I leaned for a while there towards Myron Tungavaloa just because I don't think he was good last year, but not as maybe as good as he was the year prior. And he's playing a new position. I could see him being that guy too, but I'm going Drew White. I'm sticking with you, Vince. I'm going to go with your guy. I think that's a great selection. I think Drew is going to, the production may not see a huge jump, but it's going to be the quality of the play.
It's going to be impactful. Yeah, better. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's more important to me than necessarily a big jump in production. And then lastly, this is the hardest one.
Yes,
the top rookie, and when we were rookie, we're talking grad transfers or true freshmen. Well, there are no grad transfers unless you want to go Adam Shibley from Michigan, who's a special teams guy. But I look at this, Vince, and I don't know that there's necessarily a freshman that's definitely going to play enough to be voted the top rookie.
No,
because of how deep this defense is. I mean, you got Gabriel Rubio, you've got you have Prince Collie at linebacker, you have Justin Walters is where I'm leaning right now because I think Justin's going to have a chance to play. That's where I'm going to go right now.
Okay,
just because the opportunity is there. Ryan Barnes, Phillip Riley at corner, JoJo Chant. Will they get a chance to play or not? I think the guy that right now is in position to the two guys right now that are in a position to get the most playing time in my prediction is going to be Justin Walters and Gabriel Rubio. That's just my prediction.
Yeah.
I haven't been told that. I'm just looking at the depth chart. Those would be my two choices, and I think Justin Walters is going to get more of an opportunity early on to play because of the fact that Gabriel Rubio is trying to earn reps at a position of strength.
Right, exactly.
Justin Walters is trying to earn reps at a position that's not a strength past your first couple guys. So I think the opportunity is going to be.
I like that. You know what? To be different, I'm going to go with Phillip Riley. I think he's getting a lot of meaningful number 2 reps right now. He's a guy that based on how I'm seeing him coached, is a guy that they're high on. I think he's played really, really well when I've seen him play. Like I said, a lot of number 2 reps right now. So I think if something goes wrong with some of those frontline guys, I think that Phillip Riley could be, called upon. And I'm not predicting that that's going to happen, obviously. And again, this is really hard because there's so much depth across the board that finding a freshman who's going to make an impact is difficult. My initial reaction was Gabriel Rubio, but I like Phillip Riley. I think I've liked what I've seen from him. And like I said, a year ago, I don't know that you and I are talking about Clarence Lewis necessarily. And so I'm going to go Phillip Riley and we'll see what happens.
So that'll be it. That'll be it for this defensive breakdown. We're not done talking about the defense though. Tomorrow we're going to have a bold predictions article where we're going to make some bold predictions and dive deeper into the offense. And then on Thursday, we're going to do a bold prediction article about the defense. So we're going to have plenty to talk about. And then of course on Saturday, we'll do sort of a final team. We're going to make final game predictions, record predictions, postseason predictions, college football playoff predictions, and of course on Friday we'll have our mailbag. So a lot more going on. That's going to be it for Vince's portion of today's show. But we will, if you're hang around, we're not done yet with this show. We're going to do some Q&A, but that's the part of the podcast that Vince has got to finish up work here at school, and then he is going to be getting in the car and heading over to Notre Dame for practice today.
Absolutely, looking forward to it.
We will have a written report, or it's more of a news and notes observations from practice. We will have that, but we're obviously not going to have. I mean, we're not going to do a full show on it.
Look, nothing's going to be earth-shattering, people.
Right, so and if there is, we'll do something tonight. Right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
But most likely, just look for the written report. So that's going to be it for the expectations and predictions for the Notre Dame defense. Next, we're going to have a Q&A with you all.
All right. I'll see everybody tomorrow.
All right, so that is it for that portion of the podcast. Next, we are going to dive into the Q&A section. So I'm going to get up here into the questions, and we're going to start at the very top with James. I think it's Patricia. I'm going to give it my best shot, James. I apologize if that's incorrect. It says the Notre Dame defense is a mystery with a new defensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman. What can he do to keep Notre Dame defense top notch? See, James, I don't think the defense is a mystery. I think there's things we need to learn about the defense, no question. And we raised a lot of them before, but I don't think it's a mystery. I mean, we know the basic ideas of what he's going to do. What we don't know is how much he's going to emphasize. Will he move guys around? I don't think that makes it a mystery. I mean, there's definitely questions that need to be asked. I just wouldn't go so far as to say it's a mystery. At least that's not where I'm at. I want to get to a couple of these questions before I jump down to that super chat. I do see the super chat down there, but if I go down there and grab it, I'm going to lose some questions here. So Benjamin Weiss jumps in with, have you seen Michigan's new helmet stickers? Benjamin, yes, I have, and they look absolutely flipping ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Benjamin Weiss asks, what skills are more important at quarterback at Notre Dame versus other offenses? What are less important at Notre Dame than other programs? I don't think there's anything less important at Notre Dame than other programs. I think the skills that are more important at Notre Dame are the mental skill, the mental aspect of it. There's so much pressure at Notre Dame, even, I mean, as much, if not more than any other program. You have to be able to withstand that. I think beyond that, it's the same physical traits are needed there. Then, do you have a good arm? Are you athletic? Are you accurate? Do you make good decisions? Can you anticipate? Can you throw accurately? Can you stretch the field? I think those things are all important in Notre Dame. They're important everywhere except teams that just dink and dunk all game. But I think as far as Notre Dame, the thing that makes it different is you need to have someone who can handle the pressure of being the quarterback at the University of Notre Dame. Sean Rogers, place at the table. Can't wait to hear the breakdown on the D-line. This D could end up being the best we've had in a long time. So a buddy of mine brought up the program the other day, and he said he couldn't find it anywhere. So I found it on YouTube and sent it to him. So I was like, "Why? I found it. I might as well watch it." So I did watch that again the other day. It's pretty cheesy, but still a good movie. Dan Clement says, do you think this defensive team has the talent to be a top 5 scoring defense? I do. Dan, I do, but I also think being a top 5 scoring defense also is partly due to your schedule. And I think the schedule is also favorable enough for Notre Dame to be top 10. I don't know with Cincinnati, with Purdue, with USC, with North Carolina, with some of the teams they play. I don't know if it's quite good enough to be top 5 just because there's going to be teams that could score 20 on you and you've done a great job. So I don't know if I'd go top 5 right now. I think they'd have to play better than I think they can to be top 5. What I think they can be top 5 in is just overall effectiveness relative to the schedule. I think that's where they can be a top 5 caliber unit. Maybe not scoring defense, but there's other ways that can manifest itself. Imgo Irish says, Big Ten, Pac-12, ACC alliance announcement this afternoon. Where does this leave Notre Dame? Have read that games previously scheduled with Notre Dame will count as an ACC crossover game for an alliance member. So Notre Dame, from my understanding, Notre Dame is going to be part of this. Notre Dame, again, because of the ACC connection. If the ACC does something, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm be willing to bet a lot of money that Jack Swarbrick is involved in this. There's no way the ACC and the Big Ten and the Pac-12, again, teams that Notre Dame plays all 3 of those Notre Dame has a contract with the ACC, and right now Notre Dame plays one Pac-12 team every year for the foreseeable future, USC, and they've played another Pac-12 team, Stanford, for almost 2 decades now, every year. I'll be shocked if Notre Dame was not a part of this. I guarantee you Notre Dame was a part of this. So this will not leave Notre Dame out in the cold. I'm curious to see what Jack Swarbrick's role is, but I won't be surprised at all if we find out that Jack Swarbrick has been kind of behind a lot of this stuff, bringing people together. Based on his history of what he's done as the AD at Notre Dame, it wouldn't shock me. Wouldn't shock me at all. Paul Argentieri, superhero knowledge, Brian and Vince. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that very much. Benjamin Weiss says, would you like to see the rivalry with Navy be competitive, or do you like knowing we always win 9 out of 10 games with them? I'm torn. I don't want to see it competitive, but I also don't want to see it go away. you have to have some of those gimme games in your schedule. And I love playing Navy every year, but I also miss the days where you pound Navy every year. That's kind of where I want that one to be. Kenny Moore's in the show today. Thank you for being in the show, buddy. Jojo Pineda is in the show today. Tommy Gunn says, does anybody else get the YouTube ads cutting in the opening of the show? Yes, other people get that. I have seen that happen before. And look, that's part of the deal, man. Okay, we don't charge you to watch the show. You have to allow us to put ads in there to make some money off of it. So it is what it is. Benjamin White says, this has been at the least ridiculously long and excruciatingly this has been the least ridiculously long and excruciatingly painful offseason of my life. Thanks, Irish Breakdown. Still torture, though. I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. Chief Brody thinks the defense will be top 5 in the country. Chad Williams says, Clark Lee and Bob Diaco seem to have the same philosophy. Be sound fundamentally. Keep the ball in front. I want the D to take a few more chances with blitzes. Is that what we will see with Marcus Freeman defense? See, Chad, I'm with you on this. So I believe you have to be sound fundamentally. I do. I don't think any defense can be great without sound fundamentals. But I think there's sound fundamentals. I don't think that is why Bob Diaco and Clark Lee were similar in philosophy. I think it was more about they were just dead set on saying we're not going to give up the big plays. We're not going to give up the big plays. We're not going to give up the big plays. And that's, to me, a little more of an old school way of thinking. I think the best defensive coordinators, in my view, are the coordinators who are willing to take more chances, knowing that, hey, we may give up a big play, but it's kind of like offense. It's like, look, big plays are a lower efficiency situation, right? But we're going to take those big play chances because we think we can hit some that can be game changing. Well, the defense looks at it the same with the same philosophy, but opposite view. Hey, we know we may give up a play or two because we're aggressive, but it's also going to result in some sacks, some tackles for loss, and some turnovers. And especially when you're playing the best teams, like, to me, that philosophy works great against most teams on your schedule where you just have the better players, right, Chad? But when you're playing Clemson, Bama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and again, that's the standard. The standard's not can you beat Purdue, Toledo, Wisconsin, even Cincinnati. I mean, if Notre Dame as a program can't beat those teams, and it's not where then we can't worry about Clemson and Ohio State and Alabama, right? The standard now is, are you able to beat those teams? That's the question mark. And you can't do that by playing right now. I mean, until Bama can do that because they just have better players than everybody else. Notre Dame can. You have to be willing to say, hey, look, Devontae Smith's going to beat us a couple times, right? It's just a fact. What can we do to counter that, to say, hey, yeah, you may get us a couple times, but we're going to force a couple turnovers. We're going to give our offense a chance to match that. We're going to create enough tackles for loss or sacks or pressures to force you into some incompletions, to force you into these type of deals. Because, Chad, when you look at where offenses have gone pass game-wise, I mean, some of the numbers that we're seeing now from quarterbacks are just ridiculously dumb. You know, you look at last year, Mac Jones was at 77.4%. There were 6 quarterbacks that played at least 8 games that completed over 70% of their passes. If you go back to 2009, there were 2. Colt McCoy at Texas was at 70.6, led the nation. And then Case Keenum, who was not a Power 5 guy, was at 70.2. I mean, in 2015, there was 1. Brandon Doughty at Western Kentucky. 2016, there were 2. Baker Mayfield, 70.9. Luke Falk at 70. And then 2017, 70.5. The last 3 years, we've seen this rise of air raids, this rise of the quick game. In 2018, there was 4. In 2019, there was 4. In 2020, there were a total of 7 that completed 70% or more, including 4 that were at 71 or higher. And 2 were actually guys that played the full season. Mac Jones was at 77.4 and Zach Wilson was at 73.5. Joe Burrow in 2019 was at 76.3, right? Those are incredibly insane completion numbers. The reason that's relevant is if you're just going to sit back and say, hey, we're just going to play safe defense, those guys are going to pick you apart. And we saw that with Alabama last year. Alabama didn't need to hit the big play against Notre Dame. They just said, fine, you want to play off? We're just going to take, and make plays after the catch. Mac Jones completed 83.3% of his passes against Notre Dame last year. You're not going to beat Alabama doing that. You're just not. You want to beat Alabama? You want to have a chance to beat Alabama? You got to make their quarterback you have to force him to make some mistakes. You have to. And if you don't, you're going to get beat. And, you look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss against Alabama scored 48 points. And I'm gonna pull this up here, so because this was just an insane number. So Ole Miss against Alabama scored 48 points, had 647 yards of offense, 7.5 yards per play, and lost by 2 touchdowns. Why? Because they couldn't stop Alabama's offense. So you don't have to hold them to 17. You have to hold them under 35 to have a chance to win. That's the objective now with these teams. Can you hold them under 35? Can you hold them to 31 or less? And if you're just going to let them dink and dunk you all day, then you're going to get beat. You have to be willing to admit that, hey, they're too good not to make plays. We're not going to hold Oklahoma to 6 points. We're not going to hold Ohio State to 10 points. We're not going to hold Clemson to 7 points. We're going to give up some plays, but we're going to make plays. Look at the Clemson game last year in the regular season. What did Notre Dame do that game? They gave up a lot of yards. They gave up points. Why did Notre Dame win that game? Because they made plays. Now, the difference wasn't that game. It was Jeremiah Wusu making plays, right? Obviously, the call where he blitzes off the edge, it was an aggressive call. What happens? You have a great athlete. He comes off the edge aggressively, steals the ball away from Travis Etienne, runs it in for a touchdown, right? Very next series, he gets beat on 3rd down, but he's such a great football player that Jeremiah Wusu-Kormo comes from behind, strips the ball out, Notre Dame recovers, and they're already in field goal range when they recover the ball. That's what you have to do now, Chad. And so I'm with you. I don't know if I would say take a few more chances with blitzes. That's part of it, but it's also more about just an overall aggressiveness of how you play. And that's what we see from Marcus Freeman. Yeah, we may see some more blitzes. I think we will see more blitzes, but it's more about even when they're not blitzing, they're playing more aggressive coverages. They're attacking with their front four. They're playing more press man. So they're basically saying, look, if you're going to complete balls on us, you're going to have to complete balls down the field. We're not going to let you, throw slants all day and hitches all day and RPOs all day. If you're going to beat us with an RPO, it's going to have to be a downfield RPO. And then if you're going to do that, you're going to have to hope that you can protect your quarterback long enough with our D-line. That's why the defensive line is so important to Notre Dame's present and future. That's why you need pass rushers. That's why you need guys like Anthony Lucas and Tyson Ford, I think, can be an interior pass rusher, and Aiden Cabrera, who, guys like that can be dynamic pass rushers. That's why you need guys like Jalen Sneed and Josh Burnham and Nolan Ziegler at linebacker. Guys that can obviously play great linebacker, but can also be real dynamic pass rushers. You need to be able to fly all over the field, and it's why they're recruiting cornerback the way they're recruiting cornerback, because at the end of the day, it's you've got to be able to cover. You've got to be able to cover, and if you can do that, you're going to be effective. And when you look at Cincinnati in the MAC last year, there was only one team on the schedule that completed over 60% of their throws against Cincinnati last year, right? Actually, there's only one team that completed higher than 59, and that was Georgia. It's the one game they lost. They couldn't create enough inefficiency, but they were at 56, 42, 51, 52, 51, 59, 43, 53, 43, right? You're doing that on a consistent basis. You're going to win a lot of games because you're going to make a lot of stops. And to me, the way to evaluate a defense now is you got to create more incompletions and you got to create more negatives. So incompletions, tackles for loss, and sacks and turnovers. Those are the things that are going to be key. If you're doing a lot of that, I'm willing to give up some big plays if you're doing that, because it's the balance is going to pay off in your favor if you're doing those things on a consistent basis. So that's a great question, Chad. Great question and a great observation. Tommy Gunn says, guys, you lost my comment yesterday. That's okay. I'll say it again today. Houston for breakout player on defense. We didn't lose your comment, Tommy. You were talking about breakout player on defense during a show when we were talking about the offense. So we knew that you'd come back today and give that again. So yeah, we'll get to that. So I appreciate you putting that in there. Scott Merzinger says, does this front seven have the ability to be as good as 2012-18? If so, how does that affect your confidence in winning 10-plus games? Does it have the ability to be as good as those two groups? Yes, I think it has the ability to be as good. It's got more question marks going in than maybe some of those teams. But I don't know if going into 2018, we all knew that 2018 front seven was going to be that good. I mean, they were coming off of an 8-5 year. I thought they had a chance. I thought, how they played great against Florida State. They didn't lose that game because of the front seven. But, you said, boy, did we expect it to be that good? I don't think so. 2018, I don't think anybody expected it to be that good. And I think now I'm actually more optimistic about this group than I was those, but I'm more optimistic about this group than I was those two going into the season. But I'm not sure. I need to see this group prove something to make me confident they can be what those units became. Does that make sense? So the talent's there, the depth is there. Now it's time to just go do it, right? But I don't look at it and say, boy, there's something missing, Scott. I just don't know about this position or that position. I think the confidence there. Now it's just time to go prove it. I think that's where I'm at with this group. John Monty says, you guys do a great job. Go Irish. Thank you for that. All righty. Get some questions here. Andrew Goss says, I'm looking at buying tickets for the USC versus Notre Dame game. The price is making me hesitant. Upper decks look promising, though. Look, there's not really a bad seat, in my opinion, at Notre Dame Stadium, Andrew. So, I mean, if you can get to that USC game, especially at night, because if you can do it and you can financially swing it, I would do it, because that's going to be – and we're going to do a tailgate that day. So if you're in town for that game, you can also get a chance to meet anybody. Tommy Gunn says, Brian Vinny, was the paper super chat higher than our current YouTube record? No, it was not. Notre Dame 2164. Guys, I hate to ask this, but I just lost my uncle, 47 years old, who grew up like a brother to me, and a cousin who was only 30 years old on back-to-back days. I'm just really struggling right now. And 2164, man, you are he says I could really use some prayers. You're going to have it from me. I'm going to pass this along to Vince as well. I'll let my wife know. She's a big-time prayer warrior, and man, my heart breaks for you, buddy. I don't have a lot to say other than that, but I know there's a lot of people in the Notre Dame community that will be praying for you. You got my email. It's brian@irishbreakdown.com. If you need anything, okay, reach out to me. But this is your Notre Dame family, man. You've been one of the originals. You've been here from the beginning. So we love you, and we'll be praying for you for sure. But shoot me an email if you need anything. Absolutely. Fighting Irish asked, the FSU line dropping like a rock, wonder why? Because they're trying to get the money to go in a different direction. The one thing I do know about gambling, and I'm pretty sure about this, if anybody can correct me on this, I usually when lines swing like that, there's an event that happened, somebody's out, whatever. But if nothing's changed in that regards, it's because the money's flowing in one direction, and I believe it's because they're trying to get people to go in the other direction. That would be my guess. And it says, Vincent Bryan, thank you for giving me some distractions if only for a little while. You are welcome, buddy. You're welcome. Curtis says, I don't know if it's the IB Nation this year, but I'm more than ever feeling a championship. I was born in 1987. Oh, you're young. I've been a Notre Dame fan my whole life. The feeling is different. I don't know why. Go Irish. I think it's because, honestly, in my opinion, Curtis, is because last year, for the first time, Notre Dame played Clemson and Bama and got beat convincingly, but it was games where you felt like Notre Dame didn't play well. It wasn't that, man, they didn't belong on the field. They had no chance. I've never met anyone who said, boy, if Notre Dame and Clemson could have played a week later, I think Notre Dame would have beat them. I know a lot of people that said, boy, if Notre Dame would have done this differently on offense, or if this guy wasn't hurt, or if they could have played this again, I think they could have hung with that team. Maybe not beat them, but hung with them. And obviously they proved that they could beat Clemson. So I understand. I think because you just know, Curtis, in your heart of hearts, you just know this team's different. This team has more talent. This team has a schedule that they can handle. This team has the athletes, the coaching, all those different things to be successful. I think that's why you feel that way. John Erickson with his daily IB sarcasm alert. Marcus Freeman should realize that he will never enjoy a higher favorability rating with the fan chat warriors than he does now, and leave immediately. you were going to get some laughs at the beginning of that, but then you say leave immediately. There's going to be people that do not like that sarcasm anymore, even though that we know that it is. Dropping Dime says, the only reason I'm scared of Florida State is what happened last time we played there. The last time they played there, it was the defending national champions and the number 1 ranked team in the country against a Notre Dame team that went 7-5. And Notre Dame still almost beat them. Okay? This ain't that Florida State. That's why I keep trying to tell everybody. This ain't that Florida State. This is not your daddy's Florida State. This isn't the Florida State I grew up. It's just not. They don't have that talent. I think Mike Norvell could eventually get them there, but they're a ways away from that. There's no question. We did get a couple super chats. I think I'm far enough down that I can get to those and not lose everybody else. B-Place, I appreciate this super chat very, very much, buddy. Hard for me to find a loss in the schedule, as I do truly believe we will go undefeated. What are your thoughts on my opponent toughness ranking? Number 1, Cincinnati. Number 2, Wisconsin. Number 3, North Carolina. Number 4, USC. So I did an opponent's toughness ranking at irishbreakdown.com, and I've come to realize in recent weeks that some of you don't read our website. And that's fine, but I would really appreciate if you did, because I think maybe we could see a conversation like going in a different direction. So instead of you saying, hey, what do I think of that? Maybe, hey, look, I have Cincinnati over Wisconsin. Let's talk about why. I had Wisconsin 1. I had Cincinnati 2, North Carolina 4, and USC 3. So I flipped 1 and 2 and then flipped 3 and 4, basically because I think toughness of the opponent isn't just about their roster. It's about where you play. And Cincinnati, they play at home. Wisconsin, they play away from home. And to me, that's the difference between those two. But I appreciate the super chat very much. We also have a super chat from Patrick Barnes. Just got tickets to the Cincinnati game, bringing my dad, and we were driving from North Carolina. Let's tailgate. Thanks for another great podcast while I work. You are quite welcome. Tailgate-wise, I want to see how the Purdue one goes before I commit to too many others. If that goes well, then yeah, I think we will probably do some more things. Whether it's officially with us doing something, or potentially where you guys organize something that we would then come to. So that it just depends. But I want to see how the Purdue tailgate goes first, and just kind of see, because I don't want to get too much into it, but I just want to see how that goes. No question. Sandy Grove says, Brian, busted up my back, so finally caught you live. Just wanted to thank you and Vince for the work you do. It is appreciated more than you know. So Sandy, you hurt your back and then you pay us. I kind of feel bad about that, but I do appreciate it very much. And this is the second time we've had somebody say they're hurt and home from work and they get to listen to us live. And so part of me feels bad that you guys are getting hurt, but then the other part of me is kind of honored that you guys look at that as like a blessing in disguise because you're going to watch us live. So I appreciate that very much, but I just wish it didn't have to come to you getting hurt to get there. So we'll also be praying for you too. And I'm sorry you're hurt, but hopefully it's not too bad and doesn't last too long. But yeah, we appreciate that, Sandy. Appreciate you joining us live. I hope you've enjoyed the show so far, and we appreciate you being with us. So he says it's an old war injury. Okay, all right. Well, so then I appreciate it. So if it is, I appreciate that. I appreciate your service very, very much, very much. Curtis Hewitt with the $5 super chat without a question. I appreciate that, Curtis, very, very, very much. I really do. Let's get to some more questions here. D-Rock's back in the IB house. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you're with us, D-Rock. So I want to get to some more questions here. David Knight, I saw your chat too, buddy. I'll be hitting you up here when the show is over. But yeah, sounds like it's been a rough couple weeks for a lot of the IB family, and that makes me sad. But you know what? I'm glad that a lot of you are coming. The fact that you guys, when you're hurt, when you have loss, when you have personal tragedy, professional tragedy, the fact that you want to come here to find sort of an escape, but also to find people that care about you, says a lot about the community that we have here. And I've never been more proud to be a part of this than I am today, with some of the comments that we are seeing and just the reaction that we're getting, but also the fact that you guys want to come and be part of this is just really awesome. Absolutely love it. And I'm glad that you guys are wanting to come here. Irishman 7114. My main concern with the defense is, are they going to stay on the same level, top 10 to 15, or can they take a step up, top 5? Guys need to step up, but I feel like that's not an unreasonable thought. So a couple responses to that, because I think this is a really good observation. My expectation of the defense is that they just don't take a step back. I mean, that's really where I'm at. I think they're at least going to be as good. It's going to look different, but they're at least going to be as good as they've been in the past couple of years. I'm confident in that. It's just, it may look different. They may give up more big plays this year, and that may cause some to think they're not as good, but the reality is they're actually better because they're forcing more turnovers, more tackles for loss, more sacks, right? Or maybe they're not producing more of those, but they're producing more incompletions. I mean, so we'll have to see how that plays out, but I fully expect this unit to stay in the same level. The question of whether they can take the next step, that is the legitimate question, and that's what we kind of talked about at the beginning of the show. Is Foskey going to be, Foskey being playing like a first-round pick or a guy that could potentially be one is going to be important to this defense being a top 5 defense. Maris Luafau, Kyle Hamilton, being able to stay healthy and be great is a key to this being a top 5 defense. The linebackers turning what we've seen in fall camp into that. Jason Adamiola being not just great in a couple bowl games late, but also being great in practice, being great in games. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to prove he can play a whole year. So there's just so many questions about, okay, can they take that next step? I have questions about that for this team. I don't have questions, honestly, about whether or not they're going to stay where they were. The other part of that, too, is this is why we did the offense first. Because if the defense plays at a top 10 to 15 level and the offense so if the defense just repeats what it did in 2018, for example, or 2019 even, if it just repeats that, and you look at the offense, say the offense finally becomes that 40 to 42 point per game team, that's going to make Notre Dame a championship contender. Just that the defense stays the same, offense gets way better, they're a playoff contender or a championship contender. There's also the aspect of if the offense plays to that level, especially if they start off fast, that's going to make the defense even better because now you can really pin your ears back and be aggressive because number one, hey, we're up 17-3. We can take a chance. The other part of it is, hey, we know we can take a chance because if they beat us and burn us, our offense is going to answer it. We're going to get right back at it. So I think those two things combine to say if the offense is great, it's going to make the defense any better. And that's also how you become top 5 is because your offense is so good that it gets offenses out of what they want to do because they're trying to play keep up. And then your defense can then force more mistakes. And now all of a sudden those mistakes compound. And all of a sudden a team that maybe you would have given up 20 to 24 points to in a game where your offense wasn't putting them away. Now maybe you hold that team to 10 to 13 points or 10 to 7 points. Because you jumped out on them so quick, it took them out of their game. You were able to pin your ears back and go attack them. That forced even more turnovers, which took them even more out of their game, right? See how that snowballs? So that's why I say, honestly, I think the offense could be just as big of a factor in the defense becoming a top 5 group as just what the actual defense does. And that's why we've said the offense is actually the key to this team taking that next step as a program. Got another super chat down here from William Wolf. A few of my fellow Notre Dame friends believe Cone might have a short leash, particularly if he has a really bad first quarter. I don't see it. Thoughts? Thanks. I don't see it. I think that there's a lot of people around Notre Dame fan base that just don't understand how good Jack Cone is. I think there's a lot of people that still think he is, there's this notion that, okay, Jack Cone, Wisconsin did what they did because of Jack Cone, right? They didn't throw this, they didn't do that because Jack Cone is something different. Well, to me, it's the other way around. To me, it's Jack Cone executed that offense that they're always going to run at a very high level. And that's why I've compared his numbers to other quarterbacks in that offense, because to me, that's the ideal way of evaluating what they do. So to me, I just think there's a lot of Notre Dame fans missing the boat. I really do, William. And this is a great question. I definitely don't think he's going to have a short leash unless, again, if he comes out and throws like 2 pick sixes in the first quarter, could that, oh yeah, sure. That, but barring something crazy like that, that's not a short leash. That's just you just saying, hey, I don't want to be here. I'm not ready for this. I don't see that happening. So I don't think the leash is going to be that short, to be honest with you. I don't think that it's going to be a situation where I think barring injury, I think he's the quarterback. That's how I feel. Pat Kowaleski says confidence level in the second and third group, especially if the big guys up the middle of the line. If Ademilola Heinrich go down or out extended time, could the other guy step up without much drop off? Okay, so it's hard to say this without people taking it as somehow a shot at, oh, they're not that good. But honestly, even though I expect Jason Ademilola to be a monster this year, if he goes down, I'm far more confident at that position still being great. You've got Riley Mills, you've got Jacob Lacey, you've got Howard Cross, and you've got Gabriel Rubio, who could all play that position. Are any of them as good as Ademilola right now? No. Could they be really good as a group? Absolutely. Same thing at nose. You've got Cross, you've got Lacey, you've got Rubio could play nose. Aiden Ekana could play nose. Same thing there, where I just feel like the talent level at that position is so good that they could sustain an injury and still be really good. Now, if both of them go down, would the defensive line be elite? No. Would it still be really good? Yeah, I think so. I mean, now if you get into where those two guys go down and Jacob Lacey gets hurt again, yeah, okay, you go past that, nobody's going to sustain that. But I truly believe that this team is good enough, in my view, to sustain that kind of loss on the interior. That's how good, to me, the depth on the interior. I would argue, and I'd be curious if anybody wants to disagree with this and what position they would go with. But honestly, I would argue that that's the deepest part of the football team. That there's no position on the Notre Dame football team that's deeper than the interior. And I'm curious if people feel the same way. Sorry, I'm looking over. They just came out with the release for the ACC Big Ten, and I was seeing if I could just ACC Big Ten and Pac-12. And I'm going to digest this a little bit before I talk too much about it. So maybe tomorrow we might have more about it, or maybe we might even do something about it tonight. I'll let y'all know. Let's see here. Joseph Salvatore says, how would you guys feel about the defense if Notre Dame was able to land a Caleb Evans? Also, I feel like we haven't heard much about Kurt Hinish. Expecting him to make a big impact this year. Thanks, guys. Number one, again, we've been at 2 practices. I know for a fact that one of the practices, Kurt Hinish is being limited because they already know who Kurt Hinish is, right? There's no reason that Kurt Hinish is going to take 90% of the nose tackle reps in practice. He's just not going to do it. You already know what Kurt Hinish can do. What you have to figure out as a football team is who's playing after Kurt and what if Kurt goes down. So and making sure that Kurt's healthy to be fresh for 12 to 14 games. So I don't think that's why we haven't heard a lot about Kurt. So I'm not worried about that. I think I don't care if he got if I found out that Kurt Hinish is getting less reps in practice than all the backups, then I'd say, fine, okay, good. You already know who Kurt Hinish is, right? We don't need to learn anything new about Kurt Hinish. You just need him to repeat what he's done and be healthy. That's the key. But how would I feel about the defense if they landed to Caleb Evans? I'd be thrilled because I think he's really good, and I think that he would have been at the field position, and maybe now we would be talking about maybe Clarence Lewis playing some safety and battling the safety. So I'd be very that'd have been a big one, no question about it. That'd have been a big one. Matt D says that Steve Wiltfong is reporting that Anthony Lucas is coming to USC versus Notre Dame game. That's good to know that that's been confirmed. That's been the one that Anthony has been projecting for. We've thought he would come to for a while, so it's good that he's announced that officially. We have another super chat down here from Scott Merzinger. Brian, I hate to bring up negativity, but remember Labor Day 2016 and that atrocious defense BVG put out there. I still remember your Twitter feed. Oh, I'm sure I was a lot more engaged on Twitter back then, and I was a lot more just saying whatever came to my mind back then, especially about Brian Van Gorder. So I can imagine I was not a positive person that day for sure. That was that was a great weekend for me until that game. Got to go down to Texas, got to beat the stadiums, all the Longhorn, had some great barbecue, some great food, and then that game came. And it was embarrassing. It wasn't just that. It was also the quarterback situation. How that was handled that year to me was just a train wreck, an absolute train wreck. Nolan Esparza says, what has held Isaiah Pryor back in his college career? His athleticism, physical makeup is off the charts with him coming from Ohio State. I just don't know much about him, but his ceiling looks high. See, here's the thing that you have to understand. There's 2 types of athleticism, okay? there's the athleticism that comes from, being someone who, is really athletic. You're fast, you're explosive, those kind of things. There's athleticism that shows itself from a footwork standpoint, from a quickness standpoint, change of direction. Isaiah Pryor is very explosive vertically. He's very explosive speed-wise, downhill and up, right? Where he's not a great athlete is with the side-to-side stuff, the lateral stuff, flipping his hips, those type of things, which means there's limitations to him in coverage. And that's the thing that's held him back. Look, that's why he didn't play well at Ohio State. That's why when he got in the starting lineup, he played pretty bad and got beat out and transferred, right? And he comes to Notre Dame, and they have him at safety, and he quickly moves to rover. It's because he's not a guy you want playing off the hash. He's not a guy you want playing center field. He's not a guy you want playing a lot of man coverage. That's just not his game. That's what keeps him from being impactful. The reason I think he's flashing now is because Marcus Freeman and the defensive staff are putting him in position to be successful, meaning they're not asking him to flip his hips and run with wheel routes all day. They're not asking him to cover slots. They're not asking him to run with a million tight ends. Now, they'll ask him to play tight ends. They may ask him to take backs out of the backfield, but it's going to be stuff where he's just got to run vertically or maybe chase a crosser or, jump a swing route. It's not, hey, you're playing here and you've got to read this and do this and get depth and all those kind of things. If you're doing that, then you're putting him in position to not be successful. What I like about what Marcus Freeman's doing with Isaiah Pryor, saying, okay, let's not focus on the things Isaiah can't do. Can't cover, he can't flip his hips, he can't do this, can't do that. Let's look at what he does, and the things he does really well. He's fast and he's physical, and he will hit anybody. I love that about Isaiah Pryor. And so don't ask Isaiah Pryor to do something he's not good at and then get mad at Isaiah Pryor. Marcus Freeman's not doing that. He's saying, okay, this is what he does well. We're going to ask him to do that, and he's going to be really good at it. Curtis Hewitt says, so given the linebackers showing what they are, plus the D-line looking like we expected, plus the safety spot having a stud like Kyle Hamilton, I'm eager to watch the cornerbacks. Your thoughts? Yeah, it's a big one. It's a big one. So, yeah. That's to me, the big unknown about this team is how the corner's going to play. I mean, that's really where we boil down to. It's going to be that. John Erickson says, Brian, can you do a Lindsey Nelson Sunday highlight show after the Toledo game, please? I cannot. The reality is there are copyright things that are involved with that kind of thing, and that would get me strikes against my YouTube channel. So we have some things planned, John, that we will do, but it'll only be done in a on the private message board, to where it's just harder to, it's not going to be monetized. So simple as that. And so in order to do that, we need to make sure that it's behind a place where we are knowing that we're making the money off of it, essentially. So I'm not going to turn that into a spin to sign up for the message board. I'm just telling you that there's legal reasons we can't do some of those things. And so some of the things we are going to do are going to, we're going to protect ourselves, but then also find ways to make money. Irish 812 says, Marcus Freeman's helped develop low 3-stars, Gardner and Sanders, into first-round NFL draft picks. I can't wait to see what he does with talent here. Yes, and I would argue that you need to throw Mike Mickens into that as well, because Ahmad Gardner's success began as a freshman with Mike Mickens coaching him. He was a third-team All-American as a true freshman with Mike Mickens as a position coach, and I like that combination. All right. Tatted Up Irishman says, hey, Coach, after this season, say you were to build a 2-deep of players coached by Kelly. Who makes the team from this squad? My guess is Kyron, Hamilton, and Mayer. Maybe Patterson and Hart. Patterson, if he does what I think he is going to do, is definitely in the 2-deep. Kyle Hamilton's definitely in the 1-deep. Mayer's going to have to – he's going to have to – continue to play well, but I mean, you talk about Kyle Rudolph and Tyler Eifert were part of this, this deal. So I mean, if you're going 12 personnel, then yeah, he's in it. But if I'm going 11 personnel, Michael Mayer still has a lot to prove to be better than Tyler Eifert and Kyle Rudolph and Cole Kmet even. I think he will, but I'm just saying he still has some more to prove. Jack, after the season, so I'm projecting what I think is going to happen, I could see a discussion of Jack Cohn because of just how inconsistent the quarterback play has been. Kyron's going to have to play better than he did last year. I think Kyron could be in it, but there's been some good backs. Look at Josh Adams in 2017, and you look at Theo and Sierra Wood, and there's been some pretty good backs. CJ Prosai. So at the end of the day, I think Kyron will get there. So I would say probably Kyron, but he still has a little bit to prove as well. He's got to build on last year, or at least repeat last year. You can't take a step back. Now, I think other guys could potentially be there again in a 2 deep. I could see. I could see one of the linebackers jumping into a 2 deep. It'll be tough, but I could see. I could see Marist or maybe Jack Kaiser if we're going to go to a 4-2-5, being that rover over James Onwualu. Because, again, I'm going to put Drew Tranquill inside, not Drew Tranquill rover. Jeremiah Wusu's my number 1. I could see Jack Kaiser maybe saying, hey, I'm better than James Onwualu. He could potentially be there. Jason Adamiola could potentially be there if he has the kind of – he's not there yet. But if he has the kind of season I think he could have, he could get there. Wide receiver is going to be tough. If you go to a 3 receiver set and you get to 6 receivers, then I could see Lindsey or Kevin Austin, one of those 2, breaking out as well. So there's definitely some players, but I think the thing that makes this team so good I'm not sure if this is the question you're asking, but this is the observation that I have coming out of it is it's not just that it's not just that there's some great individual players, because there are. There's been some Brian Kelly teams in the past that had some great individual players. The teams weren't great. What makes this team good is top to bottom, it's so deep. Notre Dame's had years where they've had better individual defensive linemen. They've never had a year where they've had better depth, and same thing at linebacker. Same thing at, running back, those type of things. And so I think those are the things that factor into why I'm so excited about this team is it's just the depth of this team is so good. Patrick Barnes says, how much of an impact can the freshman cornerbacks actually make this year? It depends. I mean, part of it depends on how well the veterans play. Does Ramon Henderson step up? Does Tariq Bracy play well? Does Cam Hart play well? Does Clarence Lewis step up and perform? And then do guys stay healthy? If all the veterans play to their potential, I don't think the freshmen are going to do much other than be depth guys. If those guys don't play well, then I think the freshmen could certainly have an impact of stepping up and playing. Patrick Barnes, any update on Chris Tyree's progress in pass blocking? He was a liability last year in pass protection. I wouldn't call him a liability. I think what happens sometimes with pass pro is people start focusing on the highlight reel pass pros. Like I remember in 2018 when people said, oh, Dexter's gotten so much better in pass blocking because he had a couple really good blocks, but if you grade him out overall, he was not very good in pass blocking. He got better, but better from a guy who was terrible at it before. I don't think Chris Tyree was a liability. I think Chris Tyree had some really bad plays. And he didn't have the flashy plays that Kyron Williams had that made people think he was better at it. I think Chris had some solid moments, but he looked like a freshman in pass pro. He looked a lot like Kyron Williams did as a freshman. So that's point number 1. But point number 2, more directly to what you're asking, Patrick, is because I do think it's a good question. That is something that he's got to get better at. All I'm saying, I don't think he was as bad as he was. People think he was last year, but he still wasn't good enough. Not even close to being good enough. Has he gotten better there? From what I'm told, yes. From what some conversations I've had about how this offense has looked, yeah, he's getting better. It's more about getting stronger. I think he was going against some bigger guys last year, and I think that kind of hurt him. He just didn't have the strength or the technique to be that guy. I think he's much closer to being that guy now. No question about it. Steve O'Maddox says, I'm anticipating a potential surprise starter versus Florida State. Justin Adamiola at Viper over Foskey. Thoughts? I mean, Steve, I wouldn't be shocked by it simply because, and it's not about, I think what happens with us in the media is far too often we take storylines. And so we assume certain things. And so then we spend the whole summer hyping something up. This guy's going to be a first-round pick. This guy's going to be this. That's going to be that. And then if that guy doesn't play great at the beginning or in the couple practices we see, it's, he's not playing well. And so we're going to knock him. Even though he may be playing well, he's not playing as well as we thought. So it's, he's not playing well. Then a guy that no one thought was going to do anything, Justin Ademilola, plays great, and it now turns into, well, he's playing way better than this guy. When in reality, they're playing about the same, but because the expectations were different, they view it. I've said this about Mitch Trubisky, right? Would Bears fans despise him as much as they do if he was a 5th-round pick and did exactly the same thing that he did? No, I don't think they would, because the expectation would be different. If he had the exact same career, well, that guy's had a really nice career so far. He's got a chance, but because he was number 2 pick, he stinks. So the expectation can then define how you evaluate the production, even if the production is identical. 2 players could have the same amount of production. One guy's considered a disappointment. One guy's considered a success because the guy that was the 5-star had the same production. It's a disappointment. The guy that was a 3-star has a production. Wow, look how great that guy's played. And so I think that's what's happening with Foskey. At the same time, could I also see Ademilola starting at Viper? Sure. Shock me. I wouldn't care either way. I care more about the number of snaps. I still project Foskey to start. But if Justin Ademilola continues having the good camp that he's having and they want to start him, that's fine. I don't care. I would still not start him, even if he was outplaying Foskey, because I want to have him to be able to play both. I want to see him be able to play edge on Viper. I want to see him play on the edge of the big end. I'd like to see him be using the nickel packages. And if you start him, Steve, you kind of start that clock of snaps a little sooner. And then that makes him a little bit harder to kind of have him play some of those other spots maybe later in the game as part of the rotation. So I would still want to, because Foskey's mainly just a Viper, I would say if you want to get Foskey and Justin the same amount of snaps, they could play the same amount of snaps and Justin still not be the starter Viper because you can move him at other places, if that makes sense. So that's why I personally wouldn't start him there. And I don't think they're going to start him there. But if he was there, I wouldn't say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe it. We'll see what happens though. Tommy Guns, who do you think has the best chance other than Mayer and Heinisch for games played to get their name in the record books, single season records? Boy, that's a good question. Record books. I could see Jack Cohn getting into some of the record books for single season passing and touchdowns if things go well. Kyron Williams, obviously, if he builds on last year, could get into the top 10 for single season rushing yards. Let me see here. I'm going to pull up my thing from Notre Dame that's got the records in it. So I just want to pull this up just to kind of go over the media supplement. So we can go over this real quick. All right. So if you look at rushing yards in a season, let me get down here. Rushing yards in a season. So Vegas Ferguson's at 1437. That's the all-time record. Josh Adams is at 1430. Alan Pink at 1394. That's number 3. Number 4, Reggie Brooks at 1343. Number 5 is Julius Jones and Audrey Denson at 1268. Darius Walker is 7 and 8 at 1267 and 1196. Vegas Ferguson is 9th with 1,192. And Audrey Denson is 10th with 1,179. Last year, in only 12 games, Kyron Williams was not too far off of that. He was like 50 yards off of that. He doesn't have to improve much this year. If he just has the same yards per game this year as he did last year, he's going to jump up in that regard. So actually, I'm gonna do this real quick. So just give me 1 second. I want to just do this on my computer real quick. So if Kyron would have played 13 games last year, which again, a normal season, 12 plus the bowl game, he'd had 1,218 yards. That would immediately put him at eighth all time single season. So I think, if he improves on last season by a couple hundred yards, all of a sudden he's pushing he's in the top 5 all time. So he could certainly be there for a single season. I think when you look at rushing touchdowns, last year his 13 tied Reggie Brooks' number from 1992 for single season. So he had 13 rushing touchdowns, and so and if he's actually a little bit higher if you just look at running backs, because obviously Brandon Wimbush is 7th all time, but he did it as a quarterback. So I think Kyron Williams certainly is in position to do some of those things. we've talked about, Tommy, you asked about Michael Mayer, and you'd followed up later that your question wasn't about all time as single season. Well, 6 is the record for single season, and I certainly think he has a chance to get there, or if not surpass it this year. So, I think he has a chance there. But then you look at touchdown, you look at quarterback. Notre Dame hasn't thrown the ball a whole lot in their career, and right now there's only been 7 quarterbacks all time that have topped 3,000 yards. And Brady Quinn was at 3,900. Jimmy Clausen was 3,700. Everett Golson 3,400. Brady had another 3,400 year. Tommy Rees is 5th all time, over 3,200 in 2013. Jimmy Clausen was over 3,100 in 2008. And then, of course, Ian Book in 2019 went just over 3,000. So he's 7th all time. If Jack Cohn plays the whole season, I'll be shocked if he's not at least past Jimmy's 2008 season of 3,100. It wouldn't shock me if he goes past Tommy Rees's 3,200. We've had people predicting he'll get 3,500 yards this year. If he does that, he's 3rd all time. So certainly he'll have a chance to get there. If you look at touchdown passes in the season, there's only been 3 quarterbacks all time. Well, 2 quarterbacks, but 3 seasons all time to go over 30. Brady Quinn had 2, and Ian Book had 1 in 2019. He had 34. So if he throws 30 touchdown passes this year, he jumps into the top 4. So I think Jack Cohn has a chance, and that part of that's just because it's a different era and a different offense, and passing for 3,000 yards now isn't what it used to be, and so certainly he could get into there. Now the receiving one is going to be a little bit more challenging because Notre Dame's past 10 deep in 1,000 yards receiving. I don't know if anyone on this team is going to go past 1,000 yards, so I don't know if that's going to happen. And then you get down to some of the defensive numbers. And some of those numbers are single season are really impressive. Tackles for a season, you'd have to get past 140 to crack the top 10. I mean, Bob Crable has the top 2 all time, and he had 187 and 167. I don't see anybody doing that. Tackles for a season by defensive back, Kyle McCarthy was at 110 in 2008. He was at 101 in 2009. That's the current record, the top 2 for there. You've got 80. If Kyle Hamilton can get into the 80s, he could crack the top 10 for a DB. I just don't know if he's going to have enough chances there. Look at tackles for loss. You'd have to get to minimum 16 and a half to crack the top 10. That's a lot. I mean, Sheldon Day had 15 and a half a couple years ago and didn't crack the top 10. So sacks, you look at sacks in a season. That's one where we could see a little, Julian Okwara and Romeo Okwara both tied. I think Jerry Tillery, I think the same. In 2018, I think Okwara and Tillery both had 8, I believe. And so that tied them for, both had 8. That tied them for, let's see here. That tied them for 7th with Romeo Okwara, Victor Abiamiri, Ryan Roberts, Anthony Weaver, and Corey Minor. So you get to 8, you're tying there. You get past 8, 9th, Ronaldo Wynn had 9. You get to 10, you're cracking the top 10 all time or top 5 all time. So if anybody can get into double digits, they're going to get into the top 5 all time in sacks. And then the season record for Notre Dame is 13 and a half. Justin Tuck. I don't see anybody breaking that this year. I don't know if anyone's is good enough to do it, and I don't know if anyone's going to get enough reps, like more reps than other guys get to do there. I just don't see that happening. So those are some records that you look at and say, hey, could some of those things get past this year? Interceptions in a season. You'd have to get to 7 to crack the top 10. The all-time record's 10. I don't see that. I just pass breakups in a season. You get over 10, you're in the top 10. I mean, so I could see something like that. But a lot of those, records are on defense, especially, are going to be a little bit tough. Curtis Hewitt says Myron is my breakout player or MVP. Either one works, I think. Placed as mayor for breakout. That would be yesterday's show, but I don't think he's a breakout because I thought he was pretty freaking good last year. I mean, he had a ton of plays last year. 42 catches. Let me see where that ranks all time for tight end receptions in a season. Just give me a second to look that up. Let's see, receptions in a season for a tight end. Receptions, that's receiving yards. Receptions in a season. Michael Mayer last year. Where was Cole Kmet at 2019? Give me 1 second, folks, because this is a 2018 record. I just want to add Cole. So in 2019, Cole Kmet had 43 catches, which was the sixth best all time. Michael Mayer last year at 42 tied Tony Hunter for seventh all time in a single season. That at Notre Dame, you're seventh all time as a true freshman in single season catches. You set a Notre Dame record. It's hard for me to call you a breakout at that point in time. Now, where you could be onto something, B-Place, is if we're going to look at it from a national standpoint, because maybe he's not getting enough national recognition yet, that could be it. But we looked at it more from a impact in the team standpoint, and that's where it's hard for me to call him a breakout because he was already so good last season. BRKR. I'd love to know what that means one of these days. Says, Brian, your overall command of Notre Dame football and college football overall is very impressive. Thank you for that. But that's what we do here, right? Okay, drinking game. Take a sip every time Vince says right and when Brian says no question. I'll be honest with you. If you do that, you're going to be hammered in the middle of the day. And if you get that drunk at 2:27 in the afternoon, it's time to go to a meeting at the Y. So I would encourage you not to do that. Or the other one that I have found. So when I edit the podcast afterwards, there are certain things that drive me nuts that I don't realize I do. And one of the things that I do is I don't like dead silence. And Vince and I have this problem. So we'll say like Vince will do like as he's looking for a new question. And mine is all righty. I say all righty way too much. If you did a drinking game off that, and I'm trying to not say that anymore, you'd be pretty hammered. So let's not do that drinking game because I don't want you all getting drunk. And that would be bad. Be very, very bad. Joseph Salvatore says, gonna watch any week 0 action this weekend, Brian. Yes, absolutely. I'll be watching a ton of football. I've never looked so forward to watching UCLA and Hawaii in my life. I'm actually looking forward to the Illinois-Nebraska game just because I want to watch football. I'm excited about football. There's no question about it. Curtis Hewitt says, Drew Tranquil is one of, if not my favorite players of Notre Dame, one of my favorite players of Notre Dame players all time, just a shout out. Yeah, I get that. Let's see here. Oh, see, that's one of those things that we do. Drives me nuts. Jay Clampett Investments. Do you see Logan Diggs overtaking Sebo as the third back? I'm not going to say that I'm going to predict it. I'm going to say that it wouldn't surprise me because I think Sebo's really good and he's really good. Yes, it wouldn't surprise me. Jesse Ferguson. I've been hearing some concerns recently about Notre Dame's defensive ends between Foskey, MTA, Patojo, Adamiola, Osafa Mensah, and others. It seems like there's plenty of talent. How do you rate that group? I don't know where those concerns come from. I don't. And I'm not worried about the defensive ends. That's all I'm going to say. My concerns with the defensive ends are how good are they going to be? I'm not worried about if they're going to be good. So I think that's the issue that we, on our side of this, of our role in this, can sometimes we have to report on something. We only get 2 full practices. I don't blame the guys for saying, hey, look, I got to report on what I see. And this player didn't do well, or this guy didn't get me. That's why I love having Vince there, because Vince is looking at his coach. He can say, look, they were working on coverage. They were doing 3 downs with Foskey dropping into coverage a lot, this, that, and the other. Okay, well, then he's not going to look great rushing the quarterback, right? Okay. You look at MTA, that was his, first practice back, second practice back from being gone, being with his family. His father passed away. What did you expect him to look like? I'm not worried about defensive end. I'm really not. I mean, if Jordan Pateljo's on the third team, I'm not worried about defensive end. Not worried at all. Now, Irish Joe says, when will the athletic department send out the tickets via the telephone? I'm not sure. I'd have to go look at my I saved the receipts I got, but I didn't look to see when it would be, to be honest with you. So I apologize. Four-Night Blaze. Coach, if you had to pick now, who would your Final Four be for the college football playoff? I'm not going to pick now because we're going to have a show on Sunday where we're going to release all those. And I still have a couple teams I'm deciding between for that 4th spot, number 1. And number 2, if I gave it to you now, what would be your reasoning for watching on Saturday? So I'm going to be that guy that doesn't tell you and teases you and says you have to tune in later. I hate when people do that, but I'm doing that to you. I apologize. Sean Norris says, I'm assuming this is a Florida State fan. It says, I think you guys will be better than us by the end of the year, but getting you in a hostile environment while you are breaking in a bunch of new players, including a quarterback, it's our best shot. Jack Cohn has played at Ohio State. He's played in the Big Ten Championship, and he's played in the Rose Bowl. I don't think playing at Florida State against that team. I believe Jack Cohn has played at Penn State in a start as well. With all due respect, I don't think playing at Florida State is going to be the hostile environment that you think it is. And he's not a new quarterback. He's only new to Notre Dame. He's not new to playing in big environments. The stadium he plays in is one of the loudest in college football. I think he's going to be fine. And with all due respect, Florida State's breaking in a bunch of new players as well. Potentially a quarterback. We'll see about that. But I'm sorry. It's not. If Notre Dame can't beat Florida State convincingly, I'm going to be a little bit nervous. I'll be honest with you. Cesar, good to hear another live from your channel. Greetings again from the West Coast. Thank you for being with us, Cesar. So you got with us early. So, I mean, you got 1:55. So, yeah, it's still kind of late morning for you. So I appreciate you being a part of it. And yes, David, we do. And Sean Norris, this is okay. You've redeemed yourself, Sean, for your last comment, which I didn't agree with. But he says, William Wolf, QBs don't have bad first quarters against us. That's really well done, Sean. I appreciate you saying that. But that's really funny. Sean says, why isn't my super chat going through? I don't know, Sean. I don't. That's YouTube's thing. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if you're not signed in. I don't know if I have no idea. I wish I could help you, but I can't. So, but I do appreciate you being part of the show. I do. And then Sean also says, and I'll get back some questions. As a Noel fan, can you describe a scenario where we beat y'all? What would the game look like? Score, great content, by the way. So, Sean, to me, it would have to be a situation where it'd have to be exactly what you said doesn't happen to Florida State. So quarterbacks don't have good first quarters. It'd have to be something like that. Notre Dame comes out in that first quarter, and maybe it's not Jack Cohn, but it's, I think of how Notre Dame started the Northwestern game a couple years ago. That game was closer than it should have been because in that game, Notre Dame ended up pulling away by 10. But in that game, Notre Dame fumbled the ball. I think it was like the second play of the game. Northwestern gets the ball. I don't know if they kicked the field goal. And then later in the game, Notre Dame is, thinking they're going to pull away. I think it was like 24 to 14. Notre Dame was punting, comes screaming off the edge. Guy doesn't get touched. They block a punt, and they end up scoring on the drive. Now, all of a sudden, a 10-point game becomes a 3-point game on the road, and that's not a very hostile environment. Northwestern is not a hostile environment at all. You start turning the ball over early and giving Florida State points, that's where you start getting beat. So, coverage and mistakes to give up cheap points. Defensive, offensive mistakes, turnovers that give Florida State cheap points. Special teams plays that give Florida State cheap points. If Notre Dame gives Florida State 13 to 17 points of just cheap points where it's short fields, mistakes, that's where Florida State could end up beating Notre Dame. It would have to be a game, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, Sean. I said in a podcast earlier when we broke down Florida State, I love the job Mike Norvell's doing. I just don't think a lot of fans, and I don't know if Florida State fans are this way, but I think a lot of Notre Dame fans don't understand how bad Willie Taggart was at everything. Player development, he created the cancerous culture that Mike Norvell's still trying to fix. His recruiting was awful. His coaches that he hired he hired a bunch of guys that could recruit and not a lot of guys could coach. And so Mike Norvell inherited a bad situation. And they're still a couple recruiting classes away. Now, the one they got now is pretty good. You start getting this Travis Hunter in this class on campus, and you're going to start getting things turned around. But this isn't a great roster. There are some good players, but it's not a great roster. And so I don't think Florida State can just play well and beat Notre Dame. I think if Florida State plays well and Notre Dame plays okay, Notre Dame's still going to win the football game. It's going to require Florida State having a great start, forcing a bunch of Notre Dame mistakes, so turnovers on offense, giving up, big plays. They lose contain. Jordan Travis scrambles around the edge, runs for a 60-yard touchdown. Somebody just gets washed down backside. The safety takes a bad angle. and Jashawn Corbin and Lawrence Tafili just cuts it back for a 70-yard touchdown. Something like that would have to happen. And then all of a sudden now the crowd's going crazy. They're fired up. They haven't really been in the stadium in a couple, since 2019. Something like that happens. That's how Florida State can beat Notre Dame. It'd have to be something like that. I don't think it's a scenario in which, that they just, to me, they don't have the line play to match Notre Dame, and they don't have the skill to match Notre Dame the way that they would have 5, 6, or 2014. Notre Dame didn't have any answers in the second half for Jameis Winston and Rashad Green. They just didn't. But they don't have Jameis a quarterback. They don't have Rashad Green a receiver. They don't have they don't have Ronald Darby at cornerback anymore. So they just don't have the talent they used to have. And that's why I keep telling Notre Dame fans, this is not your daddy's Florida State, right? Now, could it be in a couple of years? Yeah, I expect it to. I like Mike Norvell a lot. They're just not there right now. Scott Merzinger says, Brian, regarding my super chat, I was right there with you. The Texas game was horrid. I am so glad Notre Dame is in a better position these days. Here's to a better Labor Day weekend for all. Thanks. Scott, something just hit me. Notre Dame really hasn't played well in the last couple times they've had some of these off days. I think Louisville was, on like a Sunday or Monday, right? And the Texas game was also on a Sunday, I believe. And Notre Dame didn't play well either time. Lost one, won the other. I think if they're able to play well in this game, maybe it could be that thing where we stop talking about those things. Because you're right. The memories we have, I've seen people say, I have a feeling this is going to be a lot like the Louisville game 2 years ago. Notre Dame struggles early but pulls away. Well, why are we saying that? Because that's our most recent experience with a game like this. Going on the road against a Power 5 team on a non-normal game environment and play well. So I think it could be good for this team to come out and play well. And kind of put some of that to rest. But it's not what I'm demanding because, again, openers can be sloppy. Facilitate and form. Thoughts on turnover chain, celebration incentives. Can't stand those things. I think it depends on your program. I think it depends on what you do. I think if it's something that's player-driven, if it's something that everybody buys into, if it's something that kind of reinforces what you're trying to do, like the turnover chain, what everybody sees is this big, gaudy, ridiculous, stupid chain that they put around their neck when they play. Okay, that's what we see from the outside. But what is the turnover chain really all about for the program? It's not about gaudiness. It's not about recruiting. It's about you're trying to create a culture on defense of taking great pride in forcing a turnover, getting the ball. Right. And so you want to get the turnover chain on, you better get the ball. And you create that desire for, hey, we're going to do this. It's like Virginia Tech all those years, and they had those great defenses with the stupid lunchbox. Right? This is old black beat up lunchbox. Right. But what was it about? It wasn't the lunchbox per se. It's what it meant. If you got that, it meant that you were living up, you were setting the standard of what it meant to be a defensive player at Florida State. And that's why I say it's got to be more organic. The thing about what Miami did that makes it unique is it was organic. It was not trying to be like everybody else. The ones that are stupid are these ones that are, okay, let's be like Miami. Like Tennessee with Butch Jones brought the stupid trash cans. If that didn't symbolize Butch Jones as a football coach, I don't know what was. Thrones, and that's all stupid because that's not organic. That, like, what is a guy sitting on a throne doing? It's, oh, hey, how cool I am. It's not really creating a culture that leads to this is something that's going to help us win. Forcing turnovers, yes, we see the turnover chain, but at Miami with Manny Diaz, it's more about, hey, we want this to be about who we are. Go get the ball. And I think those are the things that help. If it's organic, if it's something that all the players are on board on, and it's something that says, hey, we emphasize this, it means we're going to be really good. That's why I think the lunch pail worked at Virginia Tech. That's why I think the turnover chain has worked at Miami. It's because it's organic, it's creative, and it's a byproduct of it is a child of your program saying this is something that's important to us as a program to be successful on this side of the ball. And because of that, what is birthed from that is the turnover chain. And the reason other people haven't been as successful with it is because they're just trying to do something to be cool or hip or whatever. And it's not necessarily a byproduct of something that's meant to make your football team better. And so that's kind of where I come from it on that one. It's a very good question. Very good question. All right, Jay with the super chat. Thank you for that, Jay. Jay says Steve Wiltfong dropped an update on Rice, and it sounds like his mother would love to see a game at Notre Dame along with Virginia and UNC. Very promising news. That's not really an update. That was always the expectation. As we've been telling you guys all along, he was not deciding anytime soon. He was going to go see games in the fall. So that's an update, but it's not an update that tells us anything that we didn't already know. So, but hey, it's good. It's good that he still plans on visiting Notre Dame. That's great. Shannon Heiduck says, Coach, who records Notre Dame's first sack of the year at Florida State? I got Foskey. Appreciate all the content. See, I think it's going to be a linebacker because I think what's going to happen is it's going to be a situation because I have a suspicion that Jordan Travis is actually going to start that game. And I have a feeling if he does, then it's going to be a situation where he scrambles because of a pressure from the front four. And the first sack is going to be sort of an out of the pocket linebacker chasing somebody down thing. That's kind of, or a third down blitz where a linebacker comes screaming through and makes a play. I think it's going to be a linebacker. And John Klimek right there with you. I think that's. David Knight says, Torian Folson in the 2014 totally whiffed when Everett Golson was trying to pass in that last drive against Florida State. Antoine Porsche Rideau, former Notre Dame football player news, Tony Jones Jr. per Saints head coach. Here we go. Let's see here. Tony Jones Jr. is considered the number 2 back for the Saints, according to head coach Sean Payton. He's having a really good spring so far, looking at the numbers. Really, really good. He was always a better back than people gave him credit for. I'm glad to see him doing well. Tony's a really good kid. Really good kid. Chad Williams says, on the flip side of that, if you allow them to dink and dunk and let their athletes make plays, it also keeps your offense on the sidelines and it makes it imperative that they score TDs on their possessions. Agree. And that's what we saw in the Notre Dame game. If Notre Dame literally had to score every time they got the ball to keep up with Alabama because they weren't forcing mistakes. They were just making Alabama run 3-4 more plays per series to score. They weren't stopping Bama from scoring. And against Bama, you're not going to force a bunch of punts against Bama. The only way you're going to beat Bama is if you force mistakes. Notre Dame didn't force a lot of punts against Clemson in the regular season last year. They forced turnovers. That was the key. They had big sacks that led to them not scoring. It wasn't them, great coverage and forced 3 straight incompletions. It wasn't that. It wasn't that. John Harrison says, this is in reference to the Lindsey Nelson. Understand completely, Brian. Was just hoping if I had to relive my childhood listening to Indy on radio, I could relive the whole experience. That'd be great. I mean, and again, that's how most of you know this, but that's how my dad became a Notre Dame fan, which then led to me becoming a Notre Dame fan. Is in Virginia, listening to the Lindsey Nelson replays, and he became a Notre Dame fan that way. And, of course, that led to me becoming a Notre Dame fan. I wish I could do stuff like that, but the way that things are now, that people value this is our content and we're not going to let anybody else profit from it, which I kind of understand. Jeff Perry says, if Kyron Williams gets 1,558 yards, he would be 7th on the career list above Jerome Evans. But I think more importantly, he'd be number 1 all time in a single season. And I would take that. I don't really care as much about the career list as much as I care about the season list. And if he got to 1558, he'd be the number 1 in a single season by over 100 yards. That would be impressive. Nolan says, did Logan Diggs just fly under the radar on recruiting services? Did COVID cause a lot of people to miss on him, etc.? Early reports seem to suggest he's much better than his 3-star ranking. See, Nolan, this is why I'm going to toot our own horn here. This is why you need to read our breakdowns. This is why you need to read irishbreakdown.com. Go back and read what I said about Logan. Now, we didn't have a YouTube channel at the time, or we didn't use the YouTube channel at the time. Go back and read what I said about Logan Diggs when he signed. He was never a 3-star recruit at Irish Breakdown, ever. I kept telling people at the time, this kid's way better than people think he is. Way better than people think he is. Meaning, I had him graded as a top 150 caliber player. I had him graded as higher than Audric Estime, who was a top 150 recruit, according to Rivals. I just think it was about, number one, he went to Notre Dame. He picked Notre Dame early. Number two, he didn't have an offer from LSU, which people say, well, how good could he be if he doesn't have an offer from LSU? Well, LSU eventually offered and wanted him pretty bad after missing on a bunch of guys, and it didn't impact his ranking. That's why you say, look at the film. What does the film tell you? And Logan Diggs' film told me he's a 4-star recruit and a top 150 player. The day he signed, I said, look, is he as good as Will Shipley? No. But at the end of the day, is this a really good football player? Yeah, he is. And, yeah, he's out playing it. But at the same time, I'm not ready to sit there and pat myself on the back and say, I was right, they were wrong, because the kid's never played a game before. So it's he's still got to go out and prove it on Saturday. That's the big thing for me. Savage Scion Fitness. Brian, what do you think of some people saying the leprechaun is offensive? I think those people need to get a life. Those people are losers who are just looking to be offended, to be mad. Their life sucks, and they just want to make other people's life suck. That's what I think of the woke cancel culture from today. Some of the things that people are fighting against are saying, you know what, we should change that. Some of this stuff is absolutely absurd. The Cleveland Indians changing their name is just stupid. I'm sorry. If you don't like it, don't watch the channel. People complaining about the leprechaun being offensive are morons. I'm Irish. I love it. If you don't like the leprechaun, then just freaking don't watch Notre Dame. Don't talk about the leprechaun. Stop being so freaking woke and this cancel culture crap. If something offends you, then so what? This is life. There's always going to be something to defend somebody, okay? Get over it. This weak, soft, like, oh, this hurts my feelings, so we've got to change it. No, if it hurts your feelings, deal with it like a grown-up and move on. Don't watch it. Look, there's things that happen in professional sports that I don't like. So what I do is I don't watch it. I don't complain about it. I don't go say, you need to change this because my feelings are hurt. No, I handle like a man, right? And I'm so sick of this. Just everyone's offended by everything. Something is going to offend everybody. And that's what I realized in the last 4 or 5 years, and I've tried to change how I do my job is, look, if I'm positive about Notre Dame, the negative people are, oh, you're just a homer. If I'm negative about Notre Dame, oh, you're just always negative. So, look, I'm going to piss somebody off no matter what I say. So I'm just going to be me. I'm going to give you my opinion. And I'm going to piss – somebody's going to be offended by me being not liking people to get offended. So what? That's a you problem, not a me problem. I just think people need to toughen up. I think we've gotten very soft as a culture. I think that we have lost any kind of concept of what are things that we should address and fix, and what are things that you need to say, get over it, okay? And if someone's offended by the leprechaun, you suck. You're a loser. You need to find something better to do with your life. Don't take it out on us that you don't think your life has any meaning, okay? And I know that's going to offend people, but I don't care. If it bothers you, then that's a you problem, not a me problem. So, sorry. All right. Let's see here. We'll get some more questions. Andrew, I will also address this on the Saturday show. No question. Ronald T'Charla says, you ain't a homer at all, brother. Much love, amigo. Appreciate that, Ronnie. Glad to see you with us today. Haven't seen you in the chat for a little bit, so glad that you're with us today. Joseph Vaughn says, you said that Drake Bowen and Sonny Styles are the top 2 linebacker targets. Where is Osbury on their board? He's there. They like him a lot. Number one, I think they know that they're probably not going to get him. And number two, I think he's a top 5 caliber guy for them. They like him. There's a reason they brought him up for camp. There's a reason they offered him. But Drake Bowen and Sonny Styles are their top 2 guys. There's no question. And VDub 804 says, we need to pick up Sonny Styles. He is a must get for Notre Dame. I would agree. David says, Notre Dame couldn't stop Alabama because the secondary was getting torched all game. This is a talent-athlete issue. What has changed in 1 year to solve this problem? So, no, they weren't getting torched all game. They were beating them on short game. So maybe you view that as torch, but I don't. Number one, I think Notre Dame's game plan was poor. I think that one thing has changed is a lot of the guys that were in the game that day. Clarence Lewis was a freshman. Kyle Hamilton was a sophomore. We didn't see much of Houston Griffith. Sean Crawford should not have been in a matchup in that game. He's not the safety anymore. And Cam Hart is a better athlete than Nick McLeod. That's the difference. And also, what has changed in 1 year to solve this problem? Nobody on Notre Dame's 2021 schedule has Devontae Smith. Alabama doesn't have Devontae Smith. Notre Dame got beat by the Heisman Trophy winner. Wow. You know who else did? Every other team that played Alabama last year. So I'm not to me, looking at it that way, to me, David, is kind of saying, well, you got beat by the best team in the country and by their best player. Well, he's gone and all your guys are back. Well, what's going to be different? Well, if nothing's different for Notre Dame, the one big difference is they don't have Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith anymore. Now, Waddle didn't play against Notre Dame, but Devontae did, and he went off. With all due respect to John Mechie and Slade Bolden and the other players on the team, they're not Devontae Smith. Might they be in 2-3 years? Maybe. They won't be in 2021. He was a special, special talent, and he beat everybody. So I think Notre Dame's got good talent. Nobody else really did that to Notre Dame a whole lot last year. Clemson, again, the guy that Clemson picked on, it's not there anymore. And honestly, shouldn't have been playing. Let's see here. Let's do some more questions. Sam F. Brian going off. Sorry. Some things just kind of get me fired up. S&P 15. How big of a role do you think Gabe Rubio will have in this first game? Will it be blowout minutes late in the fourth quarter, or will we see him quality minutes in the rotation? Barring injury between now and the opener, S&P, I think his role is going to be more probably like mop-up rotation guy. I think Gabriel could get in there, but the thing that hurt him is the injury that he had in the spring when he was about to take off. From what I was told, he was really coming along, and then he had that injury that cost him. And then the other part is he's just at a really loaded position group. Do I think Gabriel is going to get more time this year? Yeah, I do. Do I think it's going to be in the opener against Florida State? Only if there's an injury. His time will come. It will, but I don't see it being in the opener. If I'm wrong, it means he's playing really good, and that's going to be exciting because Gabriel's a very talented football player. No question about it. No question on it. I'm kind of getting past the responses about my little Ryan Malley. Damn, Brian is triggered. Yeah, I got a little triggered by that one. No question about it. That ticked me off. I'm annoyed by their being by the so just people are. I mean, look, there's reasons to be offended. There are offensive things that people can say and do, but if everything's offensive, then nothing is. At this point in time, it just get over yourselves. John Klamick, okay, didn't think anything would get Brian triggered more than Pro Football Focus and BVG, but now I stand corrected. Yes. Corey D. Brian, what's the latest with Notre Dame and AJ Harris? I think he likes Notre Dame, but I think he's going to stay south or go to Ohio State. He seems to be kind of have fallen in love with the football programs, which is disappointing because he is a great student and comes from a really, really good family. But I just think it's been convinced to him that that's the route he should go. Chris Walters, it's a little bit of a different topic. You mentioned a while back you were into Christian apologetics. Did you happen to catch the Sam Harris, William Lane Craig debate held at Notre Dame back in 2010? If not, check it out. I don't know if that's the one I've watched. I believe I've seen William Lane Craig debate Sam Harris before. I don't know if it was the one at Notre Dame. I've definitely seen him he's debated Christopher Hitchens and some people like that. I actually rather enjoy Sam Harris debates with Christians because even though I disagree with Sam Harris on a lot of things, I do believe he is a decent in his. I mean, he's a decent man in his debates. He's not trying to flame people. He's not an angry man. He just has a belief system, and he tries to defend it the best he can. I think he's wrong, and I think at the end of the day, he loses those debates, in my view, because I don't think he has facts on his side or reality on his side. But I think I can enjoy a debate with him because I think he's a respectable person that's trying to, stand up for his view, but he's not some flamethrower that, is mad at Christianity because of something that happened to him when he was younger, that kind of thing, where there's some scar there, so you can see that in some of these people who are debating Christianity. There's something that, happened to them that's caused them to hate Christianity. I don't view Sam Harris as being that. It's more of an intellectual endeavor for him. And so that's why I enjoy watching him. Again, I think he's wrong. And I think it's good for people who are believers to hear Sam Harris's debate more so than others, because if you're gonna win a debate against him, you're gonna have to really know your stuff, and you're gonna have more than just the normal Christian talking points. You're gonna have to really dive deeper. And so props to William Lane Craig for being willing to go into that sphere with a guy like Sam Harris, because he's very, very intelligent, in my opinion. Scott Merzinger, thanks, Brian. Can't wait for the next podcast leading up to the season, bro. Looking forward to that very much. Two for Travel. Can you speak on our kicking game a little bit for us? So, honestly, this one is going to be interesting. So, I'm punting. I think Jay Bramlett is a steady, solid, just do your job guy. I'm confident he's going to be a really good punter. I think he's really good last year. He's not going to be like that Tyler Newsom. Like, wow, did you see that 75-yard punt he had? I don't see that. He's just steady. And I think the coverage units are going to be very good. I think that with Jonathan Dorr, it's all mental. And that's what makes it so hard for me to really predict what we're going to see this year. When Jonathan Dorr is locked in, he is one of the better kickers in the country. He's got a great leg, really athletic leg, great leg swing, fast, explosive leg swing. But then he gets in these ruts where it's like making extra points is a challenge for him. So it just depends on which version of him shows up. And that's going to be the question. Then the big question is, so that's the kicking game. Obviously, return game, stuff like that we've talked about that. You need to be more aggressive. I'd like to see him go after kicks more, but from a kicking operation standpoint, you got your holder back, your punter's back, your kicker's back. So you got the same people. It's just, can Jay Bramlett continue to just have your natural sophomore to junior year growth? And then can Jonathan Dorr kind of get back on track? I think those are the questions, in my opinion. Nolan says, I know someone will always be upset when you disagree and get a bit fired up in your answers, but I really appreciate the honesty and authenticity. And honestly, Nolan, the reason I do that is because it's not that I don't want to purposely hurt anyone's feelings or make someone upset, but I just realize that no matter what I say, someone is going to be. When you have a bigger audience, the more differences of opinions you're going to have. That's life. And so for me, it's about, if you can speak your mind, be able to defend your point of view, have a reason why, and express that reason why, and not just because I said so kind of guy, I'm going to sleep well at nights, knowing some people liked what I had to say, some people didn't like what I had to say, some people didn't agree with me but respected where I'm coming from. And so if you try to please everybody, you're not going to please anybody. I wholeheartedly believe that. And so it is what it is. There are certain topics I won't address because I want this to be a sports channel. And I know I kind of went on that cancel culture rant, but it impacts sports right now. There's a reason I don't talk about COVID anymore, because no matter how much facts or data I'd bring into an argument, some people just, they don't want to hear it. And so you can't have a conversation and it's no longer about sports. I don't talk about politics on the channel because I don't like talking politics I don't like hearing about politics when I'm talking sports. I don't like hearing about culture. I don't like hearing about politics. I don't like hearing about movies. I hate when announcers start going off on some tangent about a player and they're not even talking about the game anymore. It drives me nuts. It's not about politics. It's just focus on the game. When I watch football, I want to watch football. And there's enough stuff on YouTube and TV and on Twitter and just all these different places where you can get all the politics you want. It's harder nowadays to find a place to get away from it. And the reason that I decided to stop talking about COVID and to kind of not talk and never really talk about politics is because, and I used to on the old side I was on, there was a free board we had, but because some people just who are fired up about that stuff, they can't have a rational conversation on either side. That's one reason why. Number two, I got tired of that stuff being intertwined into sports. And I can't be upset about it and then do the same thing on my channel. And so that's why we don't talk politics. And that's why we stick to sports, is because I want this to be an escape. And here's the thing. In this chat, there's going to be Republicans, there's going to be Democrats, there's going to be moderates, there's going to be Christians, there's going to be non-Christians, there's going to be Southerners, Northeasterners, West Coasters, there's going to be Catholics, there's going to be Protestants, there's going to be whatever. There's someone who's as a Nazarene, but you know what? If we start focusing on the things that make us different, then this becomes a pretty horrible channel. And we're going to see the same toxicity that we see on Twitter and Facebook and those other kind of things. But there's one thing that unifies all of us. It's a love for the University of Notre Dame football program, and for some more even beyond that, the University of Notre Dame. That's something that unifies all of us. And that's what I want this focus to be on for this channel. It's about that. It's about love for college football, not about what do you think about COVID? What do you think about the president? What do you think about the election? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? That's going to divide us. And there's enough stuff going on in our country that's meant to divide us. This channel is going to be about what brings us together. Now, that doesn't mean we always have to agree, but if we're going to have our debates, it's going to be about something we love and we're passionate about. And we're both coming from, 9 out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it's going to be about, we all want success for Notre Dame. We just may disagree on how to get there. And that's what I like. And that's what I want to focus on. Cesar, I totally agree with you, Brian. People need to worry for real things, issues that really matter, not about mascots and their names of different teams. I agree. What now? Yeah, Eric Ward. I agree. SMP 15. What young defensive players do you see getting more of a role on special teams rather than a major role in the defensive rotation? Okay, that one I like. Okay, Prince Collie is going to be a special teams guy this year. I think Phillip Riley. I could see JoJo being a little bit tough to keep off special teams, although I hope that they do for the reasons I mentioned in the Friday show. I think Ryan Barnes could be a guy that's going to find himself on some special teams units. I think that it wouldn't shock me if Kahanu Kia finds some role on special teams, for that motor. Other young guys, obviously the sophomores. I think if Ramon Henderson, potentially we could see Caleb Offord a little bit on some special teams. I think those are guys that we could also see on special teams. And of course, Jordan Patelho was a great special teams player last year. I think that'll continue as well. So I hope that if Xavier Watts can get healthy, that they can find a role for him on special teams as well. I think he's a guy that, to me, that'd be a great way to get him some playing time, just to let him get his feet wet, let him be a coverage guy. Remember, he was a guy that Notre Dame's defensive coaches were hoping and trying to convince to play defense at Notre Dame. That's how good of a defensive player he was in high school. You're telling me he can't find a role for your coverage units somehow? I would hope that they would do that. Ronald Tuck, thanks for the great shows. Brian and you and Vince have been bringing great content, and we're going to do even more of that. Friday, we're going to go over our in-season content plan. It's going to be exciting. Of course, the first week, it's not going to be the same because the game's on Sunday and I'm going to be traveling on Monday and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to this year's content plan. John Keever says, with Freeman bringing both an odd and even philosophy, now odd being 3-man front, even being a 4-man front, just for people who don't know, how do you coach both so your kids understand the difference in scheme while also maintaining gap integrity, playing fast, assignment correct? See, I think the thing that you're looking at it, John, is you're looking at it as two different things. You're looking at it as like an old school odd front, which has a philosophy that was usually more of a 2-gap philosophy. 4-man is more penetrating and those type of things. It's one of those things where you look at it and say, okay, they're going to be a 3-man front and a 4-man front, but they're not changing their philosophy. You're not changing your technique requirements. Here's how you beat a guy into the gap. Here's the gap. So instead of being a gap because you're in a 1 technique. It's now a 5, it's now the B gap or the C gap if you're a 5 technique. It's more of just knowing your assignment and then executing it with similar technique. It's no different than a receiver that's going to play X, Z, or W. You have to know the whole thing, or a tight end that plays attached in a wing, in a slot, or outside. It's a similar philosophy to defense where you're not just pigeonholing a guy into you're the 3 technique, right? Or you're a 5 technique. You got to be able to play 3 and 5. Just like as a receiver, you got to play Z and X, or X and W, or as a tight end, you got to play, the Y or the F. You have to be able to do it all. And it's just about how you teach it. And when you teach it that way from the beginning, and you don't teach it as 2 different philosophies, because what you said is both an odd and even philosophy. It's not that. It's an odd and even alignment. The philosophy is the same. Attack. It's 1 gap. It's here's your job. Go do it hard. They're not bringing an odd philosophy on 1 snap and then an even philosophy on the next snap. It's an even look and an odd look, just like in one on offense, 1 player in 12 personnel, the next player in 11 personnel. You're not bringing a different philosophy. You're bringing a different alignment, different personnel, and maybe different concepts, but the philosophy doesn't change. And that's the difference. John Erickson, I have to say it, the more I listen to you today, the more I wish you were my son-in-law. Appreciate it. Oh, goodness gracious. Sean Mattingly, if you could recruit a defensive player from the 2023 class who is the gap closer you would love to see sign with Notre Dame. Whoo, boy. Oh, man. I'd probably have to go with Sonny Styles. I just think because not only is he a great player, but getting Ohio, you're taking a hit at Ohio State. I think that's important. I think Ohio State right now is the preeminent Midwestern program right now. Notre Dame has to pass them first. One of the ways to do that is to take guys that they would otherwise get. They've already done that with Brandon Verneman. You can do that with Sonny Styles. That's not only going to boost you up, but it's going to be a blow to them. And I think that ultimately is the way that you go. And I think now is he a deal where it's like, is he by himself closing the gap? No, I think the guys that do that are more in 2022, to be honest with you. I think those are the guys I'm focusing on. I mean, I can't call him the gap closer when you're just brought in the best linebacker class, but it's the reason I went with him is because he is a gap closer, but it's also he's the one guy that I look at and say, not only are you building yourself up, but you're hurting right now your number 1 recruiting rival, which is Ohio State. I think that is where you're seeing. And Michael says, maybe my questions are not seen and why they seem to be skipped. Michael, I'm not sure what question you're referring to. I'm going to try to go back up here and is this the one you're talking about? Hey, Brian, any early intel on 2023 O-line recruiting and if Notre Dame has positioned themselves with some? Thanks. Michael, I don't have anything that's changed in the last month. It's just, if that's the question you're referring to, I don't have anything new on that. I think you asked this question about a month or so ago, and honestly, I've heard nothing new about 2023 offensive line. I think right now their focus is on the team and the focus is on getting guys to set up. But I know that they're still recruiting the same guys they've been recruiting. I haven't seen any new offensive line offers going out. So I think it's, Caden Proctor, it's TJ Shanahan, it's Oakland Lola kid from Massachusetts. It's guys like that. I haven't seen that board expand. I think with the 2023 class, I think it's wise not to expand the board too early because of COVID and because so many kids didn't play last year, couldn't go to camps. There's going to be a lot of those, especially the young linemen. If we talk about the older linemen, the 2022 kids who are going to break out, I think there's going to be even more 2023 kids that we don't know about right now that, hey, let's let it develop. Yeah, we like these kids, but let's not get too crazy expanding the board just yet. Let's let the season's this close. You might as well let some kids play. Then you kind of get a month into the season, you get some film, you see some kids say, hey, you know what, this kid's made the jumps we think he's going to make, let's go for him. Or, hey, this kid that we liked, he hasn't really progressed the way that we want, and we're not too far down the road with him. We can kind of back off and put our focus elsewhere. So that's kind of how I look at that. So hopefully that, Michael, that was the question that you were asking about. I'm sorry, I just trying to find questions. I skipped over that one, not on purpose. I apologize, buddy. Let's see. Ben Elijah says, love watching the IB podcast, even though most of the time I have to watch the replays, but you guys have top-notch analysis, and it's all honest analysis. I appreciate that very, very much. Emily, he says, Drake and Styles got to keep the recruiting ball rolling. No question about it. And last one, Sean Mattingly says, do you think Crystal Ball is right about Xavier Nwankpa going to Ohio State? It says 100% OSU. That would be unfortunate. I think that kid is a true gap closer, and we are stealing him from Ohio State. I said before, the only time I put crystal balls, put any like thought into a crystal ball is if a kid's going to be committing soon and they start rolling in. That's the only time, because that's what I hate about the process is you could have Ohio State, right? So like right now, watch. If Xavier Nwankpa picks Notre Dame, it's not going to be it's very rare that a kid makes a commitment that we don't know about. I think the only one that happened this year that I wasn't sure, that I didn't know was coming, was a Maureen Walker. I didn't know that was coming. He committed like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like still asleep, and I'm getting phone calls. Hey, Maureen Walker committed, and no clue was going to happen. I knew Devon High was going to commit. I just didn't know when. But kids are going to commit. You just do. We find out. We have sources. The kids tell us, and we protect the kid and all that kind of stuff. But and that's why you see it 247. That when a kid's going to come in on a certain date, you see all these crystal balls rolling in, and you hardly ever see when a kid's got a commitment date of, Thursday, hypothetically, you don't hardly ever see like half the crystal balls are for this school and half the crystal balls. No, they all flow to one school, which makes it like there's no surprise anymore. And I hate that, but it is what it is. And so what ends up happening is if he ends up, let's say he comes to Notre Dame in the fall and he loves it, and it's obvious he's going to pick Notre Dame. People are going to find out. And some of these people are going to have crystal balls are going to change. And all these people say, hey, I was right about Xavier Nwankpa. Well, look, on August 24th, 100% of the crystal balls for Ohio State. So, you all change it as you got closer and you found out that's where he was going to go. And it looks like, hey, we're all right. I have a 90 whatever percent, success rate. No, I think you should be able to make one change. And that's it. And you can't make a change within a week of the kid committing. If you make a change within a week of the kid committing, it doesn't count. That to me would be a much better crystal ball than what would make it a little bit more interesting to say, hey, yeah, your percentage is right. You saw that one way out in advance. So like, one thing we said is if Tobias Merriweather commits this summer, it's going to be Notre Dame. We said that for months. Now, anyone could jump in the last week when he makes his commitment date. You knew who it was going to be then, right? So I don't really get into that whole thing, and I don't really care what they all say right now because Xavier's not committing anytime soon. If we get into where we kind of feel it's going to be in decision-making mode and those crystal balls stay the same, that's when you get worried. Right now, I wouldn't worry about it. I like where Notre Dame is trending, but they got to finish. Right? Like, yeah, they're turning in the right direction, but they got to finish. They got to put a good product on the field. They got to continue building that relationship. And sometimes it can be challenging to build that when you're also in your season. They got to prove that they can do that. We know they can recruit out of season. Can they recruit in season? That's the next thing we're going to learn about this defensive staff. And if they do, then I think they're going to have a great chance to get them. If they don't, we'll see. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that one. So. Got a couple more that came up while I was answering that question. And Michael S. says, what's the difference between the aggressive style of Tenuta and Van Gorder and Freeman? That's a really good one. So Tenuta and Van Gorder were both very unsound coaches, meaning they would bring a pressure but then expose themselves to giving up plays in other areas, right? And it was always easy. So like I remember when they lost to North Carolina in 2008? They lost at North Carolina. I think it was 2008. And I just remember saying, like, they're going to kill Notre Dame at the seams, because I saw early that Van Gorder was Tenuta was bringing pressures. They said they're playing cover 3 with no hook curl defenders and no middle defenders, and there's no way the corners can make enough plays, and that's what they hurt them with. I remember watching the Nevada game in 2000, I think it was 2008 or 2009, and they shut Nevada out, and I was ripping the defense, and oh, you're a hater. They shut them out. I said, yeah, they shut out Nevada, who sucked, and Colin Kaepernick had like his receivers had like 10 drops that game. And a week later, they got shredded by Tate Forcier, of all people. It's because you could see the film and you could see there were holes in the defense. There were There were problems with Brian Van Gorder early in 2014, for example, that you could see a good team was going to exploit this. And it didn't happen until North Carolina. But once North Carolina happened, the floodgates were open. And he never put a good product on the field. But if you go back and look at Brian Van Gorder's first 4 or 5 games in Notre Dame, wow, statistically looks great. But I could see then that there were holes in the scheme. There were holes in the defense that good coaches were going to exploit down the road, and they did. Difference in Marcus Freeman. And I remember when they hired John Tenuta, and I did not like the hire because there was top 25. That was the big sell. He had a top 25 scoring defense for X number of years in a row. And I pointed out in total defense, well, that's because they'd play, I remember one year they played Samford, Samford, not Stanford, and Duke. And this is back when Duke was terrible. And in those 2 games, they held them to 110 yards of total offense and 0 or 3 points. And then they went out and played Clemson and got shredded. Played West Virginia and got shredded. Well, you take those 2 games that got shredded, and then the 2 games where they dominated some awful team, and you add them together and divide it by the number of games and top 25 defense. That's not a real top 25 defense. A top 25 defense is one that's good all the time. So that's why I say you got to look at the context, not just the stats. And so when you look at Marcus Freeman, it's a more sound defense. Marcus Freeman doesn't have to blitz to have an aggressive defense. That's why he says we're defensive line driven. And I've used this expression a lot, and Coach Freeman and I talked about this in the interview with him, is there's a difference between blitzing because you want to and blitzing because you have to. For John Tenuta and Brian Van Gorder's defenses to work, they had to blitz. Marcus Freeman could go a whole game and blitz 5 times, and his defense could be phenomenal. Doesn't have to blitz for it to be aggressive and to be effective. And that's the difference. And when he does blitz, there's purpose to it, and there's protections for that next level. If you're going to beat me, you're going to beat me deep. And that's what Georgia did, right? Georgia had good enough players to do that. Nobody else on the schedule was good enough to do that. And that's, look, when you blitz and you pressure, there's going to be teams that are good enough to beat you. And that's the risk you run. Your hope is that we're good enough up front to not let you beat us because we're going to give up. So you look at Bama, for example. Bama knew early on we can't throw the ball deep on Notre Dame. Bama was having a hard time protecting the quarterback. Notre Dame's defensive line was putting in good work against the Bama offensive line. If you can go back and watch that game and just focus on the line, and once the ball's thrown, fast forward to the next play so you don't see what happened. You just focus on the line. You're like, man, Notre Dame played pretty well that game. It was the perimeter, and this is kind of what David's point earlier is the perimeters where Notre Dame wasn't as good as Alabama. And so to me, you look at it and say, well, look, you're just going to let them just kind of outplay you, or do you say, hey, we're going to be aggressive and turn the heat up a little bit in hopes of neutralizing that disadvantage by being better up front? And so with Marcus Freeman's philosophy is already starting there. We're going to be aggressive up front and not allow you to beat us on the perimeter. And if you do, you're going to have to beat us down the field, but then you're not going to be able to beat us down the field because you can't protect the quarterback. Alabama knew they couldn't protect the quarterback real effectively, so they just threw quick. And they had Kyle Hamilton roaming the middle field. They started throwing quick game. And there's Notre Dame couldn't stop it. If you can stop that, then you would have been in this chance where you can maybe stopped Alabama because you were being aggressive up front. Well, Marcus Freeman's defense starts there. And the problem that Notre Dame had against Bama was when Notre Dame had to turn up the heat, Clark Lee had to turn up the heat to get pressure on the quarterback. The defense wasn't built on the perimeter to stop that. They weren't built to be a man coverage defense. And so you had guys in space in that game that weren't used to playing in space. And you had guys playing one-on-one that weren't used to playing one-on-one, and Bama exposed it. Well, with Marcus Freeman, they're going to be more comfortable in those situations. And David asked earlier about what's changed. Well, the philosophy has changed to the point where now you say, okay, you're more prepared to do this, to make this change, because that's already who you are. And so I think that is also a difference to what they do as well. Sean Grover, what do you think will be the toughest offense and defense we play this year? I think the toughest defense they're going to play this year is going to be Cincinnati and Wisconsin. I'd say Cincinnati first, Wisconsin second, but it's really, really close. Virginia Tech, surprisingly, I think is going to be the third best defense they play. If their coaching is good. I don't know how good their coaching is going to be, but talent-wise, they are very talented. Offense, best offense they're going to face this year, probably USC or North Carolina, but they don't play a lot of great offenses this year. The best coached offense they're going to play this year is going to be Purdue. The most talent they're going to play this year is probably top to bottom, is probably North Carolina, with USC being second, is where I would go. USC could maybe get there, but right now I'd give the edge to North Carolina. Sean Mattingly says, always glad when I'm able to listen and channel into your podcast. I appreciate and value your opinions. Keep it up, Brian. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Andrew Sokolowski, great show today. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. Jacob Hayden, this is an easy one. Who's the greatest recruit you've ever seen? Ronald Curry. I've said this a million times. Ronald Curry is the greatest high school football player I've ever seen. Yeah, I've said, and I'll take this to my grave. If Ronald Curry would have gone to Florida State or Michigan or a program like that instead of North Carolina, because what happened was Boo Williams, who's a basketball guy, convinced Ronald Curry, you're a great basketball player. He's not. He was the national player of the year in basketball. That's how great he was in football. He was so great in football that it convinced people he was also great in basketball. Ronald was successful in high school in basketball because he was such a great athlete. He had no left hand and he couldn't shoot. But people convinced him that he could play basketball in North Carolina. He couldn't. And so he went to North Carolina. This is after Mac Brown. This is in the Carl Torbush, John Bunting years when they were awful. He was a one-man show. And he still had some great highlight plays. If he would have gone to, again, this is back in the late 90s. If he'd have gone to Michigan, which is a school that liked him for football, a pro-style team, if he'd have gone to Florida State, which was a pro-style team, if he'd have gone to a system like that, he would have been phenomenal. I mean, the reason nobody knew who Michael Vick was in high school is because he was in the same league as Ronald Curry. And Ronald Curry was the greatest high school football player I've ever seen, ever, on film or in person. Greatest high school football player I've ever seen. It's not close. There's no second, in my opinion. It's just, he is the answer. I played against Plexico Burris in high school. I played against Deion Dyer, Dre Bly. I played against Dre Bly in high school. I played against those guys in high school. Ronald Curry was a contemporary of ours, and it wasn't close. It wasn't close. It was the best high school football I've ever seen. Best high school recruit I've ever seen in my life. John Long, thanks for the great show. Excited to get back to the beginning. Always good. Thorough product. Thanks, Brian. You are welcome. Patty, appreciate that very much. Let's see here. Hearing people saying our D is going to be top 5, but it's really top 2, and it ain't 2. I don't really understand what that means, so I apologize. John Mattingly, what team is the biggest test we have in the regular season? UNC, Cincinnati. I still think it's Wisconsin because that's the one tough game that's away from home. Notre Dame still has to prove they can win away from home the way that they can at home because they haven't shown that yet. 2017, you lost at Stanford. You got killed in Miami. The last really good road team was probably Michigan in 2019. They got killed, lost at Georgia. Last year's road games were what? Like you beat Pitt, who's 6-5. You beat 6-5 Boston College. You know, let me pull up Notre Dame's schedule real quick because their road schedule last year. Georgia Tech, who stunk. North Carolina was good. That was a really good away from home win. But then you played Clemson, got smacked. Alabama got smacked. They got to still prove that they can win big games away from home. And the Wisconsin one is to me, that's why I think that's the biggest test. D-Rock, Brian's tea leaves greater than crystal balls fact. Thank you. Appreciate that. John Long, I got my money on USC being good. Toughest opponent. We'll see. Let's see. We will see. Michael, I'm really looking forward to seeing Jack Kaiser's development under Freeman's defense. Big fan of Kaiser's ability. I agree. Michael S., thanks, Brian. Best explanation of Freeman's aggressive approach compared to past DCs. Asked many other sports commentators same question, but they never explained it as clearly and precisely. Thanks. You are welcome. Sean Mattingly says, what regular season games will you be attending this year, Brian? So far, my plans are I will definitely be at Florida State, Toledo, Purdue, Cincinnati, Navy for sure. Still working on others. Those are the ones I'll be at for sure. Here we go. Caleb says, that means our D is top 2 in the country, but it ain't 2, which means it's going to be number 1. I see what you did there. And I apologize. That kind of went right over my head, Caleb. So I apologize for that. All right. Last one from Michael. In my area, the best recruit I ever saw play high school would have been LaShawn McCoy. He was unreal and played against quality competition. He was Shady McCoy was a good one. I've heard a lot of people from the Pittsburgh area and that saw him play. Was he Pittsburgh? Well, the people that I know are from Pittsburgh. I don't know if he was. I forget where he went to high school. So anyway, well, that's it. This was a very, very long show today, much longer than I anticipated it to be. I'm going to go dive into this ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12 thing here now. We're going to have a lot going on. I just got an email saying my Built Bar order has arrived. My wife went crazy. So I told her, hey, babe, if you want to get some things, let me know. And she sent me this really long list of things she wanted to try. And that's the nice thing about it is if you get something from Built Bar, you use the Irish Breakdown code, you're getting a discount. So, maybe makes it a little bit easier for you to try a couple things that you otherwise wouldn't have tried. And if you're interested in that, check down below. It's a protein bar. It's a very healthy protein bar, and it tastes phenomenal. I truly have not bought since I first tried a Built Bar. My mom made me try it. Love it. Since then, I honestly have not. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I've not bought a candy bar since then, and I like candy bars. They are very sweet, very tasty. My wife likes them. She's a big chocolate person, and she likes them a lot. Like I said, she ordered a lot more stuff the last time than I did. So you can take advantage of that. In the description bar below, you'll see a link to the Built Bar. Use the Irish Breakdown promo code, all one word, all caps. You'll also see down there our merch store. You see a link to signing up for the message boards. If you have not done it, please join it. We're going to have some really fun stuff join for that. Our conversation the last week and a half has really taken off. A lot of good talk on there, and just a place for Notre Dame fans to come and talk ball. That is the best thing. I'm there answering questions all the time, so it's a great place to be. And before you leave, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. All of you have a great day. Tomorrow, bold predictions on offense. Thursday, bold predictions on defense. And Friday, mailbag on Friday. So thanks for being with us. Check out irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.